Eliza Carter threw her whole body against the iron chain until her wrist tore open and the blood froze black on the metal. "Somebody!" she screamed into the blizzard. "Please, somebody! Anybody!" But the man who locked her in that barn was already riding home, telling the whole valley his wife had died of fever 3 weeks back. He left her to freeze. He left her to be forgotten. If you believe no woman on this earth deserves to be thrown away like that, subscribe to this channel, follow Eliza's story all the way to the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see just how far her story travels tonight. She pulled again. Not because she believed the chain would give. She had stopped believing that hours ago. She pulled because the moment she stopped pulling, she would have to be still, and being still meant listening to the cold crawl up her arms and settle into her chest like it owned the place. "Come on," Eliza whispered to her own hand. "Come on, you stubborn thing. Move." Her fingers wouldn't close. They'd gone the color of ash somewhere past midnight, and now they just hung there off the iron cuff like they belonged to somebody else. She stared at them the way a person stares at a stranger. "You're mine," she told them. "You hear me? You're mine, and you'll do what I say." They did not do what she said. The wind hit the barn wall, and the whole rotten structure groaned, and for one wild second she thought it was him coming back. She jerked toward the door, chain and all, teeth bared like an animal. "Nathan!" Her voice cracked down the middle. "Nathan Crow, you coward! You come back here and you look at me. You look at what you did." Nothing answered but the storm. Of course it didn't. He wasn't coming back. That was the whole point, wasn't it? He'd made sure of it. She could still hear his voice from the last time he'd stood in that doorway, calm as a man discussing the weather, brushing snow off his good coat. "You should have stayed grateful, Eliza," he'd said. "A woman like you, from where I found you. You should have stayed on your knees and thanked God I ever looked twice." "I was never grateful," she'd spat back. "I was afraid. There's a difference, and you never once learned it." He'd smiled at that. That was the terrible part. He'd smiled. "Folks already think you're in the ground," he'd said. "Fever took you 3 weeks ago. I stood at your grave, Eliza. I wept real tears. The Hendersons brought a pie." He'd crouched down to her level, and she'd smelled the whiskey and the wood smoke on him. "There's a headstone in the churchyard with your name carved deep. So you see, you can scream all you like out here. A dead woman's got no voice." Then he'd stood and tipped his hat to her like she was a lady at a dance and shut the door. That had been before dark. Now it was after midnight, and Eliza Carter had learned exactly what her husband meant. She'd screamed until her throat bled. She'd screamed the names of every soul in that valley who might have heard, and the mountain had swallowed every one of them. "I ain't dead," she said now, quiet, to the dark. "I'm not. I know I'm not." But her body was arguing the other side. She let her head drop back against the beam. The wood was cold enough to burn. Somewhere far, she thought she heard bells, church bells, and she knew that was the cold lying to her, the way it lies to people right before it takes them. She'd heard old trappers talk about it, how dying in the snow felt warm at the end, how you saw things, how you heard your mother calling you in for supper. "You're not my mother," she told the bells. "You're the cold. I know your tricks." She thought about her mother anyway. Thought about a lot of things in that hour. Thought about the girl she'd been at 16, before Nathan, before any of it. A girl who could outrun every boy in the county and never once looked down at her feet when she walked. She wondered where that girl had gone. She wondered if that girl would have been ashamed of her, chained up in a barn, half frozen, waiting to die quiet so as not to give a man the satisfaction of her noise. "No," Eliza said out loud. "No, she wouldn't. She'd be spitting mad." And something in her, some last hard little coal that Nathan Crow had never managed to stamp out, glowed just enough. She lifted her head. She filled her lungs until they ached. "Help me!" she screamed, and it tore something loose in her throat. "Somebody help me! I'm alive! I'm still alive out here!" The wind threw it right back in her face. She screamed it again anyway. And again. Until the words weren't words anymore, just sound, just the raw animal insistence of a person who refuses, refuses to go quiet. And half a mile up the mountain, through snow, no sane man had any business being out in. Caleb Whitaker stopped walking. He stood dead still on the trail with his horse blowing steam behind him, and he cocked his head like a hound. "You hear that?" he said to the horse. The horse didn't answer. The horse wanted to go home, and Caleb couldn't rightly blame it. He almost kept walking. That was the truth he'd sit with later, the truth that'd keep him up nights. He almost put his head down and kept climbing toward his own warm cabin and his own quiet fire, because whatever was down in that valley wasn't his concern. And a man learned real fast in these mountains that other folks' troubles had a way of becoming your grave. Caleb Whitaker had made a life out of minding his own business. 8 years, he'd made a life of it. 8 years since he'd come up this mountain with nothing but a rifle and a wound in him that didn't show. 8 years since he'd decided that people were a thing that happened to you, like weather, like bad luck. And the smartest thing a man could do was get himself somewhere the weather couldn't reach. He trusted his horse. He trusted the mule when he had one. He trusted the dog before the dog died. He did not trust men, and he'd stopped, a long time ago, expecting anything gentle to come out of the mouths of people. So when the sound came again, that thin, desperate thread of a human voice tangled up in the wind, every hard-earned instinct Caleb had told him to walk on. He didn't walk on. "Well, hell," he muttered. And he turned the horse toward the valley. The snow was to his knees, then to his thighs where it had drifted. He broke trail by force, one leg and then the other, the horse fighting him the whole way, and twice he went down and had to claw himself back up with his beard full of ice and his lungs on fire. He followed the sound. It cut out for long stretches, and his heart cut out with it, and then it'd come back, weaker each time, and he'd fix on it and drive himself lower. "Keep hollering," he said under his breath to whoever it was. "Whoever you are, don't you dare stop. Keep hollering." The barn came up out of the white all at once, leaning and half swallowed. Caleb dropped the reins and floundered the last stretch to the door and put his shoulder to it, and it was frozen fast, iced shut, and he hit it, and it wouldn't give. Inside, Eliza heard the blows and went rigid. He'd come back. He'd come back to finish it, or to gloat, or to drag her somewhere worse, and every part of her that had been screaming for rescue 2 minutes ago now curled in on itself and went silent as a mouse. "Go away," she whispered. The blows kept coming. "I said go away." Louder now, because if this was the end, she'd meet it loud. "I know it's you, Nathan. You come to watch me die, you sick, rotten thing? Well, I ain't dead yet. I ain't giving you that." The blows stopped. Then a voice came through the wood. And it was wrong. It wasn't Nathan's voice. It was low and rough and out of breath, and it said, Ma'am, I'm gonna get this door open. Stand back if you can." Eliza's breath stuck. "You ain't Nathan," she said. "No, ma'am, I don't know any Nathan." A grunt, and the door shuddered in its frame. "Name's Caleb. I'm gonna get you out." "You're lying." Her voice was shaking bad now, and not just from the cold. "This is a trick. He does tricks. He sends men. Are you one of his men?" "Ma'am, I don't belong to a living soul, and neither should you." The door boomed. "Now I'd surely appreciate it if you'd tell me where you're standing so I don't knock this whole rotten wall down on top of you." She almost laughed. It came out as a sob instead. "I can't stand," she said. "I can't move. He chained me to the post. My hand. Something's wrong with my hand." There was a silence on the other side of the door, a short one. But she heard something change in it. "All right," Caleb said, and his voice had gone very level and very calm, the way a man's voice goes when he's just decided he'll break every bone in his own body before he'll fail. "All right, ma'am, you hold on. You hold on to me, you hear? Not to that post. To me. I'm right here." And then the door exploded inward off one hinge, and the storm came howling into the barn. And for the first time in the worst night of her life, Eliza Carter was not alone. She saw him against the white. Big, snow-caked, wild-bearded, more mountain than man. She flinched back so hard the chain bit into her raw wrist and she cried out. Caleb stopped where he was. He didn't come at her. That was the thing that broke something open in her later, when she'd have the strength to feel it. A stranger with every reason to rush, and he stopped, and he put his hands out where she could see them, empty. "I ain't gonna touch you till you say I can," he said. "Look at my hands. Nothing in 'em. I'm just a man got caught out in the same storm as you." "Why?" It came out of her, cracked and disbelieving. "Why would you come down here? Nobody comes down here. He said nobody would ever come." "He was wrong," Caleb said simply. "Now, ma'am, I got to come closer to see about that chain. Is that all right by you?" She stared at him. Every instinct Nathan had beaten into her over 3 years screamed that kindness was the bait, that gentleness was the trap, that the moment she trusted a man was the moment he owned her. But she was dying, and this man had his hands out. "Eliza," she whispered. "What's that?" "My name. It's Eliza, not ma'am. If I'm going to die in front of you, you can use my name." Caleb Whitaker knelt down in the snow that was blowing in through the broken door, and looked at this woman chained to a post like a dog, her wrist torn and black, her lips gone blue, her eyes still burning like she'd fight God himself, and something moved in his chest that hadn't moved in 8 years. "Eliza," he said, "you ain't dying tonight. I didn't come all the way down this mountain to watch you die. That'd be a mighty poor use of my evening." And she did laugh then. It hurt. It came out wet and broken. But she laughed. "There she is," Caleb said quietly, and he meant the fight in her, and he reached slow for the chain. The iron cuff had frozen to her skin. He saw it, and his jaw went tight. "Eliza, I got to look close at your hand, and I'll tell you true, it ain't gonna be pretty, and it ain't gonna feel good. You want me to lie to you, or you want it straight?" "Straight," she said at once. "I've had my fill of lies, 3 years worth." "Then here's straight." He turned her wrist as gentle as a man handles a bird. "This cuff's welded to you with ice and blood both. I pull it wrong, I take skin. I got a file and a chisel in my kit, and I got to break the chain off the post first, then work the cuff after, someplace warm. That's a lot of steps, and you're running out of the one thing we can't buy more of, which is time. So I need you talking to me the whole while. Can you do that?" "I can talk," Eliza said. "God knows I never learned to shut up. It's most of what he hated about me." Caleb pulled his kit around and went to work on the chain where it wrapped the post, and he kept his voice going steady the whole time, low and even, like a man gentling a spooked colt. "This Nathan," he said, and the file rasped. "He your husband? He calls himself that." Her head lolled, and she jerked it back up. "There was a preacher, and there were words. I don't reckon God was listening." "What did you do to earn a chain?" He said it careful, not like an accusation, like a man who already knew the answer and only asked so she'd keep talking. "I tried to leave." The file rasped and rasped. "Third time trying. First 2 times he caught me and I learned what a locked door feels like from the inside. This time I got clear to the county road before his men ran me down." A shudder took her that wasn't the cold. "He didn't beat me this time. That's how I knew it was different. He didn't even raise his voice. He just smiled and said he knew a way to keep me that'd stick. And he brought me here." The file stopped for half a second, then went on. "And then," Caleb said, "and then he told the whole valley I died of fever, weeks ago. Said he buried me. There's a stone with my name on it." A terrible sound came out of her, half a laugh and half a scream. "I've got a grave, mister. I've got a grave and I'm not even in it yet." "Caleb," he said. "What?" "Not mister. You said use your name, I'll use mine. Caleb." The chain gave with a crack and swung free of the post, and he caught it before it could jerk her wrist. "There. You're off the post. That's step 1, and don't let anybody tell you step 1 don't count." She sagged against him then, all at once, the fight going out of her legs, though not out of her eyes. And Caleb got an arm around her back and took her weight like it was nothing. "Easy," he said. "Easy, I got you. I got you now." "Don't," she breathed. "Don't say that. Everybody says that. Everybody says I got you right before they take something." Caleb went still with her weight against him. "Eliza," he said, "look at me. Look right here." He waited until she did. "I don't want a thing from you. Not your gratitude, not your body, not your name on a paper. I want to get you warm and I want to get that iron off your hand, and then, if you tell me to, I'll walk away, and you'll never see my ugly face again. That's the whole of it. That's the whole entire bargain. You believe that or you don't, but it's the truth, and I'll say it as many times as it takes." She searched his face like she was looking for the lie in it. She'd gotten real good, over 3 years, at finding the lie in a man's face. She couldn't find it. "Who hurt you?" she whispered. "Somebody hurt you bad. I can tell. It takes one to know one." Caleb didn't answer that. He got his other arm under her knees. "I'm going to carry you to my horse," he said. "You keep talking. Tell me anything. Tell me your mother's name. Just don't you go quiet on me." He lifted her, and she weighed almost nothing, and that near-nothingness made his teeth grind because he knew what it meant, how long she'd gone without food, how far Nathan Crow had been willing to let her fall. He carried her out into the storm. The horse had drifted off a ways, and Caleb whistled it back, and it came, unhappy, ears pinned, and he got Eliza up across the saddle and himself up behind her and wrapped her inside his coat with her back against his chest and turned the animal's head up the mountain. "Talk," he said into her ear over the wind. "My mother's name was Ruth," Eliza said, and her words were starting to slur. "She had red hair. Everybody in the family had red hair but me. I came out dark, and my daddy used to joke the milkman. Keep going. She died when I was 11. Fever, real fever, the kind that's true." Her head tipped. "Funny. He picked fever. For my fake dying. He picked the thing that took my mama. I don't think he even knew. He just picked it." Eliza, eyes open. "They're open." "They ain't. Come on now." She forced them open. The snow was a wall. The horse fought for every step. "Ask me something," she said. "If I got to keep talking, you got to keep asking. That's the bargain. You're big on bargains." Caleb almost smiled into her hair. "All right," he said. "This Nathan Crow. Where's he keep himself? What's he do, besides bury living women? Supplies, freight. He's got his hooks in every wagon that moves through the valley." Her voice was fading in and out like a fiddle heard across water. "Whole county thinks he hung the moon. Feeds the church. Buys the sheriff's whiskey. Nathan Crow. Everybody loves Nathan Crow." And behind her, Caleb Whitaker went cold in a way the mountain had nothing to do with. His hands went still on the reins. "Say that name again," he said, and his voice had changed, had gone low and flat and strange, and even half frozen and half conscious. Eliza heard it change and turned her head. "Nathan Crow," she said. "Why? Caleb, why are you looking like that?" He didn't answer for a long moment. The wind screamed past them. When he spoke, it came out quiet enough that she had to strain to catch it over the storm. 8 years back, Caleb said, I had a brother, younger than me, Samuel, good boy, softer than me, kinder than me. Everything good in our family went into Sam, and everything hard went into me. His arms tightened around her, not toward her, just tightened, like the memory needed somewhere to go. Sam signed on to guard a freight run through Raton Pass in the dead of winter. Fella that ran the outfit oversold the route, took double the money, sent the wagons out too heavy and too late to save on a second trip. Storm caught him. That fella cut his losses and told the drivers they were on their own and rode home warm. Eliza had stopped breathing. They found Sam in the spring, Caleb said, when the pass thawed. Him and 4 others. That fella never paid a nickel, never spent a night in a cell, come out of it richer than he went in, and folks called him unlucky. He drew a breath that shook. The outfit was called Crow Freight and Supply, and the fella's name was Nathan Crow. For a long moment, there was only the storm. Then Eliza Carter, dying across the saddle of a stranger she'd met an hour ago, started to cry. Not from the cold this time. From something else entirely. From the terrible, impossible arithmetic of a world that would take one man's brother and one woman's whole life and set them both at the feet of the same smiling monster, and then, on the worst night of both their lives, drive them into each other's arms 1/2 mile up a mountain in a blizzard. That ain't chance, she wept. Caleb, that ain't chance. No, Caleb said, and his voice had steadied now, had gone hard and certain as the iron cuff still hanging off her wrist. "No, I don't reckon it is. He thinks I'm dead. He thinks you're gone. He thinks he got away clean with both of us. He thinks a lot of things." Caleb urged the horse on through the drift, up toward the dark shape of his cabin just now showing through the white. Man like that spends his whole life thinking the world belongs to him, thinking he can bury what he don't want, and the ground'll just keep it. Eliza's hand, the ruined one, found his forearm and gripped it with what little it had left. "I'm not going back in the ground," she said fiercely. "You hear me, Caleb Whitaker? I clawed my way out of one grave tonight. I am not going back in another one." "No, ma'am," Caleb said. "You surely are not." "Eliza. Eliza." He said it like he was learning it, like it was a word worth keeping. "Now stay awake just a little longer. We're almost to warm. You stay with me, and I swear to you, on my brother's name, I swear to you, that man is going to answer for the both of us before this is through." The cabin door came up out of the storm, and Eliza Carter, who 3 weeks ago had been buried by the whole valley, who 3 hours ago had begged the blizzard to take her quick, held on to the arm of a mountain man who'd stopped when every other man alive would have walked on, and let herself believe, just a little, just enough, that the mountain had not brought her here to die. It had brought her here to be found. The cabin door slammed shut against the storm, and the sudden absence of wind was its own kind of shock, a roar cut off mid-scream, and Eliza flinched at the silence the way a person flinches at a raised hand. "Easy," Caleb said. "Easy now. It's just the quiet. Quiet can't hurt you." "You'd be surprised," she said, and her voice came out so thin it scared them both. He carried her past the cold hearth to a low bed against the wall and set her down soft as he could, and she made a sound when her wrist bumped the blanket. A short bitten-off cry she tried to swallow and couldn't. "Let me see it," Caleb said. "No." "Eliza." "I said no. Give me a minute. Just give me 1 minute where somebody isn't reaching for me." Caleb pulled his hands back and held them up again, empty, the way he'd done in the barn. "All right. My hands are right here where you can see 'em. I'm going to build up that fire because you're going to lose that hand, and maybe a good deal more if I don't get heat in this room, and I can do that from across the room without laying a finger on you. That suit you?" She stared at him a long moment. Then she nodded, one hard jerk of her chin. "That suits me." He crossed to the hearth and went to work. And he did it without looking back at her, which she noticed, which she couldn't help but notice, because in 3 years she had never once been alone in a room with a man who wasn't watching her to see what she'd do. Nathan watched her the way a hawk watches a field. His men watched her because he told them to. This one crouched at his own fire with his broad back turned, like she was the least dangerous thing in the world, like it never once crossed his mind she might grab something and run, and it unsettled her worse than watching would have. "You're not gonna look at me," she said. "Didn't figure you wanted me to." "I don't. I just—" "Men look. That's what they do." "Some men." The kindling caught and he fed it. "I ain't in the habit." "Why not?" He was quiet a moment, coaxing flame. "When you spend enough years alone, you learn there's a difference between looking at a thing and seeing it. I got no use for the first one. Fire's coming up now. You'll feel it directly." And she did. The first lick of real warmth reached her across the room, and it was almost worse than the cold had been, because the cold had gone numb and merciful, and the warmth brought everything screaming back to life, every crack and bruise, and the deep grinding ache in her frozen hand, and she curled forward over it and shook. "There it is," Caleb said, still not turning around. "Hurts, don't it? That's the thaw. Means you ain't dead. A dead thing don't hurt." "Wonderful," she gasped. "That's just wonderful. Everything hurting means I win." "In these mountains?" "Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what winning feels like." He fed the fire until it roared, and only then did he turn, and he stayed where he was, giving her the whole room between them. "Now, that hand. I'm not going to touch it without your say-so. But I need you to understand what's coming if we wait too long, and I'll say it plain because you told me you're done with lies. The flesh on that wrist is froze. If it don't thaw right, and soon, it goes bad. Goes bad, I have to take it. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Eliza looked down at her own black and gray hand like it belonged to a corpse. "Take it," she repeated. "I've done it before. On a trapper name of Ezra, 2 winters back, took 2 toes and the tip of a finger, and he's alive to complain about it. I'd rather not. I'd a whole lot rather not. But I won't lie and tell you it can't come to that. So those are my choices." She laughed, and it had no humor in it. "Let a stranger hold my hand, or let a stranger cut it off. Those are the choices the mountain gave you. I'm just the fella reading 'em out." He crouched down slow, keeping the distance, meeting her eyes. "But here's a thing that ain't on the list, and it's the most important thing, so hear me. Whichever you pick, it's yours to pick. I won't touch you till you say the word. Not to help, not to save your life, not for anything. If you'd rather lose the hand than let me near it, I'll go get my kit, and we'll do it that way, and I won't think one hard thought about you. Your body's yours. I know that ain't news to most folks, but I got a feeling it's been a while since anybody said it to you." The fire popped. Eliza's throat worked. "He'd have made a joke of this," she said quietly. "Nathan. He'd have said something about how I always did need somebody to do for me. He'd have made me thank him. I ain't Nathan. I'm starting to gather that." She closed her eyes, opened them, and she held out her ruined wrist across the space between them, and it cost her something to do it. He could see it cost her, could see 3 years of learned terror screaming at her not to, and she did it anyway. "Don't make me regret this, Caleb Whitaker." "No, ma'am," he said, and he came to her slow, and he took her hand like it was made of glass. "I surely won't." He worked on that cuff for the better part of an hour, and he narrated every single thing he did before he did it. "This is warm water, not hot. This is going to sting. I'm going to file here, not there." And she understood after a while that he was doing it on purpose, that every announced motion was a small returned scrap of the control that had been stolen from her. And somewhere in that hour, without either of them saying a word about it, something between them shifted from a stranger's mercy into something with the first fragile bones of trust. "There," he said at last, and the iron cuff came away into his hand, and he set it on the floor and pushed it under the bed with his boot, so she wouldn't have to look at it. "Off. It's off. You're free of it." Eliza stared at her bare wrist. The skin beneath was raw and wrong-colored, and there was a ring worn clean down where the iron had ridden her, but it was a hand, her hand, still attached to her, still hers. "It's ugly," she whispered. "It's alive." He wrapped it clean and careful. "And the color's coming back, see there, along the thumb. That's good. That's real good. You've got feeling in it?" She flexed her fingers, grimaced. "It's screaming at me." "Screaming's good. Screaming means the nerves are talking. It's the quiet ones you got to worry about." He tied off the wrapping. "You're gonna keep it, Eliza. I'd bet my horse on it." And for reasons she couldn't have named, that was the thing that finally broke her. Not the barn, not the chain, not the grave with her name on it. It was a mountain man telling her she'd keep her own hand, and she folded forward over that bandaged wrist and cried like something inside her had come loose. Great heaving sobs that shook the whole bed, and Caleb Whitaker sat back on his heels and did not touch her, and did not tell her to hush, and did not say one single word until she was done. When the worst of it passed, she wiped her face with her good hand and looked at him, mortified. "I don't cry," she said. "I want you to know that. 3 years, and I never gave him one tear. Not one." "I believe you." "I mean it. I'd sooner have died than cry in front of that man." "I know. So don't you go thinking, Eliza." He said it gentle. "You didn't cry for him. You cried because you're safe enough to. That's a different thing entirely, and it ain't weakness, it's the opposite. A body that can't cry is a body still bracing for the next blow. You cried because some little piece of you just now decided maybe the blow ain't coming. That's the bravest thing I've seen you do all night, and I watched you spit in death's face not 2 hours ago." She looked at him for a long time. "Who are you?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was closer to an accusation. "Men don't talk like you. Men don't do like you. I've known a lot of men, and not one of them was you." "I'm just a fella lives on a mountain." "No, That's a wall you put up. I know a wall when I see one. I built enough of my own. She sat up straighter, and some of the fight came back into her, and it did his heart good to see it even aimed at him. You told me about your brother out there. You told me about Sam. A man doesn't say a thing like that, and then go back to being just a fella lives on a mountain. So who are you really? What were you before you were this? Caleb got up and went to the fire and stood with his back to her, and she thought she'd pushed too far, and then he spoke. I was a lawman, he said. Once. Eliza went very still. Deputy Marshal, New Mexico Territory, and Colorado, when the work took me here. He watched the flames. Good at it too, real good. Fella with a nose for the ones that hid behind their money, the ones that never got their own hands dirty. I put a lot of those away. Thought it meant something. He was quiet. Then Sam died in that pass, and I did what any lawman would do. I built a case. Airtight. Every drover that lived, every ledger I could subpoena. I had Nathan Crow dead to rights for overselling that route and sending those men to die. What happened? What always happens. He turned around, and his face was carved out of the same hard stone as the mountain. Crow bought the judge, bought 2 witnesses to recant, bought a story where it was Sam's own fault, where the drovers went out against orders. And the county, that loved him for his church money and his free whiskey, the county believed it. Case got thrown out. I got told I was a grieving brother who'd lost his objectivity. They took my badge for it, said I'd let it get personal. His jaw flexed. Personal. My brother froze to death in a pass and they told me I let it get personal. So you quit. So I quit the whole rotten business. Quit people. Came up here where the law's just weather, and the weather don't take bribes. He looked at her. And I told myself I was done. Done trying to fix what men break. Told myself for 8 years. Slept fine on it mostly. And then tonight you heard a woman screaming in a barn. And then tonight, Caleb said, I heard a woman screaming in a barn. The fire crackled between them. You could have walked on, Eliza said softly. You said so yourself. You almost did. I almost did. Why didn't you? Caleb Whitaker was a long time answering that, and when he did, his voice was rough. Because 8 years ago I couldn't get down to Sam in time, he said. The pass was closed, and by the time it opened, he was gone, and I have laid awake every night since wondering if he screamed, if he called for me, if he died thinking his big brother was coming for him, and then just didn't. He swallowed. And tonight I heard somebody screaming who wasn't gone yet, who I could still reach, and I'll be damned before I walk past that sound twice in one lifetime. Eliza's eyes filled again, and this time she let them. Then I'm glad it was me, she whispered. I'm glad it was me you heard, even with all of it, even with him being the one who... She stopped. Something occurred to her, and her voice changed. Caleb, he doesn't know you're up here, does he? He doesn't know you exist. No. Reckon he thinks I drifted off years ago, if he thinks of me at all. So when he comes back to that barn to make sure I'm dead, he's gonna find an empty barn and no body. Yeah, I've been chewing on that. Caleb crossed and crouched by the bed again. And here's where I got to ask you something hard, and I need you clear-headed for it, so drink this first. He'd set broth to warming, and he brought it to her now in a tin cup and pressed it into her good hand. Small sips. Your belly's shrunk, it'll fight you. Small sips. She sipped. It was the best thing she had ever tasted in her life, and she nearly cried again just from that and was ashamed of it. Ask me your hard thing, she said. Nathan Crow told the whole valley you died 3 weeks back. Fever, funeral, headstone. Caleb watched her face. You told me that in the barn, but 3 weeks is a long time, which means when he chained you tonight, that weren't the first time he had you locked away somewhere. Where were you for 3 weeks, Eliza? Where's a man hide a wife he's told the world is buried? And Eliza Carter stopped with the cup halfway to her mouth, and the broth trembled, and something haunted moved across her face. The cellar, she whispered. Under the freight office. He built it out special. Nobody knows it's there but him and 2 of his men. Her hand shook so bad Caleb took the cup before she spilled it. 3 weeks in the dark, Caleb. 3 weeks I heard folks walking around over my head, laughing, buying flour and nails, and I screamed till I had no voice, and nobody heard because the walls were packed with sawdust. He'd come down every few days, bring food, just enough, told me he was deciding what to do with me. And what did he decide? He decided a dead woman who stays dead is worth more than a wife who might talk. Her voice had gone flat and far away. He said if I stayed buried quiet in that cellar, he might let me live down there. But I wouldn't stay quiet. I never could stay quiet. It's the one thing about me he could never break. So he moved to the barn instead. The storm was just convenient. He said the mountain would do what he didn't have the stomach to. He's a coward, Caleb said, and there was iron in it. Wants folks dead, but wants the mountain or the fever or God to be the one that does it, so he can keep his hands clean and his soul, if he's got one, tidy. That's the worst kind. The kind that kills you and grieves you in the same breath and believes both. He set the cup aside. Eliza, that cellar. If we could get somebody down into it. A lawman that ain't bought. A witness. That cellar is a room built for hiding a person the world thinks is dead. You can't explain a room like that. That's not a room a good man builds. Something kindled in Eliza's eyes. You're thinking like a lawman again. I'm thinking, Caleb said slowly, that 8 years ago, I couldn't touch that man because it was my word and a stack of paper against his money. But a woman he buried and a room he built to bury her in? Eliza, that ain't a case that gets thrown out. That's a rope. He caught himself. If we're careful, if we're smart, and if you want it. It's your life he stole. It's your choice whether we go and take it back. But even as he said it, a shadow crossed his face, and she saw it. What? She said. You thought of something. Say it. 2 things, Caleb admitted. First one's simple. You can barely stand. That hand's got to heal. You've got to get food in you. Get your strength. That's a week minimum before you can travel, and the passes will be snowed for longer than that. So we've got time whether we want it or not. And the second thing. Caleb's jaw worked. The second thing is that Nathan Crow's going back to that barn come first thaw, and he's going to find it empty. No chain, 'cause I've got the chain. No body. Broke door. Tracks, if the snow didn't cover 'em, though I expect it did. He met her eyes. And a man like that don't shrug and figure the wolves got you. A man like that gets scared. Because an empty barn means maybe you ain't dead, and if you ain't dead, everything he built comes down. His church money don't save him. His bought judge don't save him. A living Eliza Carter is a rope around his neck and he knows it. The blood drained from Eliza's face. He'll look for me. He'll turn the whole valley over looking for you. And he'll do it quiet. 'Cause he can't let on you might be alive, but he'll do it. He's got money and men and a real good reason. Caleb reached out, then stopped himself, then let his hand rest on the blanket near hers, not touching, just near. I ain't telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you've had enough men decide things for you in the dark, and I'll not be another one. This is what's coming. You should know it as clear as I do. Eliza looked at his hand resting near hers on the blanket. Then, slowly, she moved her good hand the last few inches and set it over his. Then we'd better be smart, she said. Both of us. Because I am not going back in that cellar, Caleb. I'd rather die on this mountain than go back in that cellar, and I mean that all the way down. You ain't going back in the cellar. You can't promise that. No, Caleb said. I can't promise it. But I can promise I'll be standing in front of the door of it, and he'll have to come through me first. And I have been shot twice and stabbed once, and I am still here being contrary. So he'd best bring more than 2 men. And Eliza Carter, for the first time in 3 years, felt something she'd near forgotten the shape of. It took her a moment to name it, sitting there in a warm cabin with her hand over the hand of a man she'd known one night, the storm screaming outside, and a monster somewhere down the mountain who thought she was in the ground. It was Hope, small and terrified and stubborn as a weed in stone, but it was Hope. All right, she said. All right, Caleb Whitaker, we'll be smart. The days that followed taught them both things. They taught Eliza that a man could share a one-room cabin with a woman and never once make her feel hunted. Caleb slept on the floor by the door those first nights, gave her the bed without a word about it. And when she woke screaming from the cellar and the barn and the dark, as she did most nights, he didn't rush to her, didn't grab her, just spoke low from across the room. "You're in the cabin. You're on the mountain. That noise is the wind. That light is my fire. You're free," until the world came back to her, and her heart climbed down out of her throat. "You don't have to do that," she told him after the fourth night. "Wake up for me. You need your sleep." "I don't sleep much anyhow." "Because of Sam." "Because of Sam." He fed the fire. It was near dawn, the sky just graying. 8 years I've heard him in the pass. Now I got a new voice to lay awake to, and yours has the advantage of still being alive, so I'll take it, thank you. Go back to sleep. It ain't morning yet." "How can you be kind?" she said. "After everything, after Sam and the badge and 8 years alone. How is there any kind left in you? It should have all bled out." Caleb was quiet a while. "I asked myself that same thing about you," he said finally. "First night, watching you spit at death with a froze hand and no voice left. 3 years chained and cellared by that man, and there's still fight in you, still fire, still enough of you left to laugh at my ugly jokes. By rights there shouldn't be. He should have stamped it out. And I lay there thinking, if she's got some left, maybe I do too. Maybe it don't all bleed out. Maybe some folks just refuse to run dry." He looked at her across the room. "You kept mine alive, Eliza, near as I can tell. Before you, I'd have walked past that barn. So don't ask me where my kindness comes from. Ask yourself. You're the one lit it back up." She had no answer for that. She lay back and stared at the ceiling and let the tears run sideways into her hair where he couldn't see. And she thought, for the first time, that maybe surviving Nathan Crow wasn't going to be the whole story of her life after all. The days taught Caleb things too. They taught him that the woman he'd pulled out of the barn had a mind on her like a steel trap. She wanted to know everything. How the freight routes ran, which passes closed when, who in the valley owed Nathan, and who feared him, and who might, just might, be persuaded to stand against him if given a reason and a shield. "You're building the case," Caleb realized one evening, watching her scratch names into the dirt floor with a stick, her wrist still wrapped but working now. You're doing what I did 8 years back." "I'm doing it better," Eliza said, not looking up. "You built your case from the outside. I lived inside that man's house for 3 years. I know where the bodies are, Caleb, some of them literal." She sat back. "There's a ledger, a real one, the true one, not the one he shows. He keeps 2 sets of books. Everybody like him keeps 2 sets of books. The false ones in the office where anybody can see. The true ones in a strongbox in the cellar he built to hide me in." She looked up at him. "The room that proves he's a monster also holds the book that proves he's a thief. He put both his sins in the same hole in the ground. That's arrogance. That's a man who never once believed either sin would come to light." Caleb crouched down beside her, looking at the map of names in the dirt. "You've been thinking about this a long time," he said. "Longer than the week you've been up here." 3 years, Eliza said. "I've been building this case for 3 years, Caleb. In my head, in the dark, in that cellar. I just never had anywhere to put it. Never had anybody who'd believe me." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "Never had a lawman who couldn't be bought, and a mountain nobody could climb, and a man who'd stand in front of a door for me. I had the whole case, and no world to try it in." She looked at him, and her eyes were fierce and wet at once. "And then a storm dropped one right on my head." Caleb looked at her a long moment. "Eliza," he said, "when this is done, when Crow's answered for it, one way or the other, what is it you want? For your own self. Not against him. For you." The question seemed to catch her off guard. She sat back on her heels and thought about it, and he could see it was a thing she hadn't let herself think about in a very long time. Maybe not since she was 16 and could outrun every boy in the county. "I want a door I can lock from the inside," she said finally quietly. "That's all. That's the whole dream, Caleb. I want to live somewhere with a door, and I want the lock on my side of it. And I want to know that when I close it at night, I chose to." That nobody put me behind it. That I can open it any time I please and walk out into the sun." She laughed, embarrassed. "It's a small dream. I know it's small." "It ain't small," Caleb said, and his voice was thick. "It's the biggest one there is. It's the whole entire thing, that dream. A door you lock from your own side." He had to look away from her. "That's all any of us are ever really after. Most folks just never had it took from 'em long enough to know." The storm broke on the 9th day. Eliza knew it before she opened her eyes. Knew it from the quality of the light and the deep new silence. And she sat up in the cot and said, "It stopped." Caleb was already at the window. "It stopped." His voice was grim. "Which means the passes'll start to open. Which means Nathan's going to that barn." Eliza was up, testing her strength, and she was stronger. Days of Caleb's broth and stubbornness had put her back on her feet. But she wasn't whole, not yet. How long, before he can get up there? 2 days if he pushes it, 3 if he's smart and waits for the drifts to settle. Caleb turned from the window. "And here's the thing I've been turning over, Eliza, and you're not gonna like it, so I'll say it fast. When he finds that barn empty, he panics. When he panics, he moves that ledger. He moves it out of the cellar to some place nobody knows, some place we can't find. And he fills that cellar back in with dirt like it was never there. He erases both sins at once, the second he thinks you might be alive." He met her eyes. "The window where that cellar still holds what we need to hang him is closing. The storm that saved your life is the same storm that's kept his cellar in place. And it just stopped." The blood went out of Eliza's face for the second time in 9 days. "How long do we have? Till he gets to that barn and gets scared?" 2 days. Maybe 3. Caleb was already pulling gear from a peg by the door, moving fast now, the lawmen fully awake in him. "So here's where we are, and I'll lay it out plain because we're past the time for anything else. We can wait. You're not healed, you're not strong, and the smart, careful thing is to wait weeks, let you get your legs, gather allies, do it right." He shouldered a coil of rope. "But if we wait, that cellar's empty and filled in before we ever get down there. And it's your word against his money all over again. And I have already watched that fight get lost once and it cost me my brother." He turned to her. "Or we move now. Down a mountain that's half snow, on legs that can barely hold you, to beat a man with money and guns to the one piece of proof that can end him. Before he gets scared, before he moves the book." Eliza stood very still in the middle of the cabin. "You're asking me," she said slowly, "to go back down there, to the valley, to him, to the cellar he chained me under, on purpose, 9 days after I clawed out of it." "I'm asking you nothing," Caleb said. "I told you the first night, your body's yours, your choices are yours, and I meant it, and I mean it now more than ever, because this one's the biggest choice of your life, and I will not put my thumb on it. So I'm not asking. I'm laying out the 2 roads and telling you they're both yours to walk or not walk. You want to wait and heal and maybe lose the case, that's a road, and I'll stand it with you. You want to go down that mountain now and take him while we still can, that's a road, and I'll walk in front of you the whole way. But the choosing," his voice went rough, "the choosing is yours, Eliza. It has to be. It's the whole point of everything I've done since that barn. It has to be yours." And Eliza Carter looked at the man who had never once decided a thing for her, who had handed her back her own life in pieces and let her put it together her own way. And she understood, standing there, that this was the exact thing he'd been giving her all along. Not rescue, not shelter, not even kindness, really. Choice. The thing Nathan Crow had spent 3 years grinding out of her. The thing this stranger had spent 9 days grinding back in. She walked to the window. She looked down the mountain toward the valley where a man who'd buried her alive was, right now, saddling a horse to go make sure his lie held. She thought about 3 weeks in the dark under the floor. She thought about the storm and the barn and the chain frozen to her wrist. She thought about a door she could lock from the inside. A door she didn't have yet. A door she'd never have as long as Nathan Crow walked free and rich and loved by a whole valley that thought her dead. "There's a ledger in that cellar that can hang him," she said, not turning around. And there's a room down there that proves what kind of man builds a grave for a living wife, and in 2 days he's going to erase both. Yes. And I'm the only person alive who knows exactly where it all is. Which means if I don't go, nobody can. Which means my choice isn't really wait or go. She turned from the window and her face had changed, had hardened into something Caleb hadn't seen yet. Something that had been buried under 3 years of survival and was only now clawing back to the surface. My choice is, let him win or take my life back. That's the choice. That's the only choice there's ever been. Eliza, I'm going down the mountain, she said. Tomorrow, first light. And you're going to walk in front of me like you promised, and I'm going to walk into that cellar he built to bury me in, and I'm going to walk back out of it carrying the thing that ends him. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. He wanted the mountain to take me. Well, the mountain gave me a lawman and a plan, and my own 2 feet back. So he's going to get me back, Caleb. He's going to get me back walking through his front door in front of a witness he can't buy. And won't that just be the worst surprise of his whole rotten life? Caleb Whitaker stared at her. And then, for the first time in 9 days, for the first time in maybe 8 years, the mountain man smiled. A real one, slow and wide and dangerous. Ma'am, he said, and tipped an imaginary hat to her. I have been waiting 8 years for somebody to say something like that. Eliza. He said it soft, and then he said it again, firm, like a man laying down a stone he meant to build on. Eliza Carter, walking into her own grave to dig her own way out. He shook his head. Sam would have liked you. Sam liked the contrary ones. Then let's go make Sam proud, Eliza said. And let's go make Nathan Crow wish he'd checked that barn twice. That night, neither of them slept. Caleb worked over his gear by firelight, checking his rifle, his ropes, the old lawman's instincts coming back to his hands like they'd never left. And Eliza sat across the fire and told him everything, poured out 3 years of a monster's secrets into the one honest ear she'd ever found. The men who'd stand and the men who'd run, the false ledger and the true one, the sheriff Nathan owned and the young deputy from Denver he didn't, a fella named Prentice, new to the county, still fool enough to believe the law meant something. Prentice, Caleb repeated. You're sure he's not bought? He's been in the county 4 months. Nathan hasn't had time to buy him proper yet, and Prentice looks at Nathan the way a dog looks at a snake. He knows. He can't prove it, but he knows. Eliza leaned toward the fire. If we can get that deputy down into that cellar, if we can show him the room and the ledger before Nathan can talk his way clear. Caleb, a room built to hide a dead-not-dead woman and a boy with a badge who already hates him. That's a rope, Caleb finished. That's a real rope, not a bought one. He set down his rifle. But it all hangs on beating him to it, on getting into that cellar before he empties it. And that means the 2 of us, down a bad mountain, tomorrow, ahead of a scared rich man, and however many guns he brings. He looked at her across the fire. I won't lie to you and call it safe. It's the furthest thing from safe there is. I know. He could kill us both, him or his men, real easy. I know that too. Then why? Caleb said, and it wasn't doubt in his voice, it was something like wonder. Why you smiling? Eliza Carter looked into the fire, and her ruined wrist rested easy in her lap now, and her face in the firelight was the face of a woman who had already died once this winter, and found, to her own surprise, that she'd come back meaner and more alive than she'd ever been. Because for 3 years I lay in the dark, she said, and I built this whole case in my head, and I thought nobody would ever hear it. And now there's somebody who'll hear it. Now there's a mountain that gave me back my legs, and a lawman who'll walk in front of me, and a deputy who already hates the devil we're hunting. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright and terrible and free. For 3 years I was the dead woman. Tomorrow I get to be the one who comes back. Do you know how long I've dreamed about the look on his face, Caleb? Do you have any idea? I got some idea, Caleb said quietly. Then you know why I'm smiling. And outside the cabin, the mountain lay silent and white and enormous under the cold stars. The storm spent, the passes opening. And somewhere far below, in a sleeping valley, a man dreamed easy in a warm bed. Certain, absolutely certain, that his wife was in the ground where he'd put her, and that the worst of his troubles was a broken freight axle and a slow week for trade. He did not dream of the barn. He did not dream of the mountain man. He did not dream of the woman coming down the mountain toward him in the dark, carrying 3 years of his secrets in her head, and 9 days of borrowed strength in her legs, and a fury in her heart that no storm, no cellar, no chain, and no grave had ever once managed to bury. He slept the sleep of a man who thought he'd won. And up on the mountain, Eliza Carter and Caleb Whitaker sat by the fire until the sky began to gray, and made their plans, and did not sleep at all, and waited for the light that would take them down. They came down the mountain in the gray before dawn, Caleb breaking trail, and Eliza a step behind him, with her hand knotted in the tail of his coat, and neither of them spoke for the first hour, because the cold ate words, and the descent took everything they had. It was Eliza who broke the silence, halfway down, when the trail leveled onto a shelf of rock. "Caleb, save your breath. I have to say it now in case I lose the nerve later." She stopped, and he stopped, and she made him turn and look at her. "If this goes wrong, if he takes me back, or worse, I need you to promise me one thing." "I ain't promising you I'll leave you. Don't ask it. That's not what I'm asking." Her jaw was set. "If it goes wrong, you get to that deputy, Prentice. You leave me, and you get to Prentice, and you tell him where the cellar is, and you make him look. Promise me that. Because me getting out alive doesn't matter if that man walks free to do it to the next one. And there'll be a next one, Caleb. Men like him don't stop. There's always a next woman and a next cellar." Caleb looked at her a long moment in the thin gray light. "You're something else, you know that," he said. "Halfway down a mountain to your own reckoning, and you're worried about a woman who ain't even been born into his path yet. Promise me." "I promise you I'll finish it," Caleb said. "Whatever else happens, I finish it. That man does not walk free past today. On Sam's name, on your name, I finish it." He held her eyes. "But I ain't leaving you, Eliza. Both things are true. Now come on. Light's coming and we want to be down before he stirs." The valley opened up below them near mid-morning. The town small and smoking at the far end of it. The freight office, a long, low building set apart near the wagon road. And Eliza stopped when she saw it, and her breath went ragged in a way the cold had nothing to do with. "That's it," she said. "That's the office. The cellar's under the back half. There's an outside hatch behind the woodpile that his men use, and an inside stair from the storeroom that only he uses." Her voice had gone thin. "3 weeks I was under there, Caleb. I know every board of that ceiling. I counted them. I've got them memorized." "Steady. I'm steady." She wasn't, and they both knew it, and Caleb didn't call her on it. "The hatch behind the woodpile. That's our way in. His men won't be at the office this early. They drink late and come slow. If he hasn't gone up the mountain yet, he'll be at the house across the way, and the office will be empty. And if he's already gone up the mountain to the barn, then he's up there finding it empty right now," Eliza said grimly. And the clock just started running twice as fast. They came down off the last of the slope and into the fringe of the town on foot, keeping to the backs of buildings. And Eliza pulled Caleb's hat low over his face and her own shawl high, and they moved like two people who had every reason not to be seen, which they were. They made the woodpile behind the freight office without a soul marking them. Caleb crouched by the hatch. It was iron-strapped and heavy, and set into the ground at an angle, and there was a hasp on it with a padlock, and the padlock was open, hanging loose in the ring. Caleb went very still. "That lock's open," he said quietly. "He keeps it locked, always, even when I was down there, especially when I was down there. It's open now." Caleb's hand drifted toward the rifle slung on his back. "Somebody's been down there recent, or is down there now." Eliza's face drained white. "He's moving the ledger. We're too late. He's already—" "Or he ain't gone up the mountain at all," Caleb breathed, and the whole shape of the day tilted under them. "Eliza, think. What if he never went up? What if he already knows? He can't know I'm alive, nobody. What if somebody found that barn before him? A drover, a trapper, word travels. What if the whole reason that lock's open is he came down here at first light to move his book because he already heard the barn was empty?" Caleb's voice was fast and low. "We didn't beat him here. We might have walked right up on him. And from below their feet, muffled through the hatch, came a sound. A boot on a wooden stair. Then Nathan Crow's voice, calm and pleasant and unmistakable, floating up from the dark of the cellar, as easy as a man discussing the weather. "You can come down, Eliza," he said. "I know you're up there. I've known since the woodpile. You always did move like a spooked cat." Eliza stopped breathing. Caleb's hand closed hard on her arm and put a finger to his lips and shook his head. "No, don't. Don't you answer him." But Nathan wasn't done, and every word came up cold and pleasant through the iron. "I had a real interesting morning," Nathan called up. "Rode out to check a certain barn, and do you know, some fool trapper beat me to it and came running to town all lathered up about a broke door and a busted chain and no body. I know there's no body, because there's a headstone in the churchyard says my poor wife's 3 weeks in the ground. So I told the trapper he'd found himself an old horse stall and imagined the rest, and I bought him a bottle, and I sent him on his way." A pause. "And then I came here, to move a few things, just in case. A careful man moves his things." Another pause, and his voice dropped, and the pleasantness peeled off it like bark off a dead tree. "And now here you are, standing on my hatch, breathing loud as a bellows. Come down, Eliza. Bring your mountain friend. I'd surely like to meet the man who dug up my wife." The silence after that was the loudest thing Eliza had ever heard. Caleb's mind was moving fast. She could see it in his face, the lawman running the angles, and when he leaned close, his voice was barely a breath. "He's got no gun on us, or he'd have used it already. He wants us down there. He wants us in the dark where he knows every board and we don't. We don't go in his hole. We make him come out into the light." "He won't come out. He will if he wants us." Caleb's eyes were hard. "Because he can't let you walk. Not now. Not with that trapper already talking. You are the one thing in this world that can hang him, and he knows it, and he cannot let you leave this yard alive." He gripped her arm. "Which means all we got to do is not go down. All we got to do is get gone, get to Prentice, come back with a badge that ain't bought. He's cornered himself. He just don't know it yet." But even as he said it, they heard it. Not from below, from behind them. The click of a hammer being thumbed back. "Afternoon," said a voice, and it wasn't Nathan's. It belonged to one of Nathan's men. A big slab of a man come around the woodpile with a pistol leveled, and behind him a second one. And Eliza knew them both, had feared them both for 3 years, and her whole body locked up at the sight. "Boss," the big man called down. "Easy. Found 'em standing on the hatch, just like you figured. Her and some mountain trash." "Well, bring them down, Dell," Nathan called back, and now there was pleasure in his voice, real pleasure, the warm, rich pleasure of a man whose plans were coming right. "Bring my wife home. She's been away too long." The world narrowed to the barrel of Dell's pistol. "Rifle off, real slow," Dell told Caleb. "Left hand, set it down. You so much as breathe wrong, mountain man. I put one in the woman first, and I'll put it somewhere it takes her all day to die of. Boss likes 'em able to hear him talk." Caleb's jaw worked. His hand moved to the rifle strap, and Eliza, watching him about to give up the one weapon they had, watching 3 years of nightmares close around her again, felt something rise up in her that was bigger than her fear, and she did the one thing not a soul in that yard expected. She started screaming. Not in terror. She threw her head back and screamed at the top of her ruined lungs, screamed words, screamed them at the whole sleeping town. "Help! Nathan Crow's got us. He's got us behind the freight office. I'm Eliza Carter, and I ain't dead. I'm alive. Nathan Crow buried me alive, and I'm right here. Help!" "Shut her up." Nathan's voice came up the stair, no longer pleasant at all, cracking, panicked, human for the first time. "Dell, shut her up. Shut her up now." Dell lunged, and Caleb moved. 8 years off the job, and the mountain man moved like the storm itself, took the rifle strap in the same motion. He swung the stock, and the wood caught Dell across the wrist, and the pistol went off into the dirt, and then Caleb was inside the big man's reach, where a pistol's no good, and he put an elbow into Dell's throat and rode him down. The second man got 2 steps before Eliza, screaming still, snatched a length of split cordwood off the pile, and swung it two-handed into the back of his knee, and he buckled, and Caleb was on him before he hit the ground. It was over in 10 seconds, and it was ugly, and it was loud, and doors were opening down the street now, faces appearing, a woman with a broom, a man in his shirt sleeves, the whole valley waking to the sound of a dead woman screaming her own name. And Nathan Crow came up out of the cellar. He came up the outside stair into the daylight with a pistol in his hand and a strongbox under his arm, and he stopped dead when he saw his 2 men down, and the mountain man standing over them, and his wife, his buried wife, his dead and gone 3 weeks wife, standing in the yard with a piece of firewood in her hands and her chest heaving and her eyes on fire. For a moment, nobody moved. For a moment, Nathan Crow simply stared at the impossible thing in front of him, and every certainty he'd built his life on cracked at once. And Eliza watched it happen, watched the color leave his handsome face, watched the pleasant mask fall clean off. And she had dreamed of this moment for 3 years in the dark, and it was better than she'd dreamed. "Hello, Nathan," she said. "You're dead," he whispered. "You're dead. I buried you. There's a stone." "You buried a lie," Eliza said. "The mountain wouldn't take me. Turns out I'm harder to kill than you reckoned. Turns out a lot of us are." She took a step toward him, and he took a step back, and something wild and wonderful sang in her at the sight of Nathan Crow backing away from her. "3 years you told me what I was worth. 3 weeks you kept me in that hole under your feet and sold flour over my head while I screamed. And you know what I did down there, Nathan, in the dark? I remembered. Every root you oversold, every drover you cheated, every dollar in the true book you keep in that box under your arm right now. I've got it all, right here." She tapped her own temple. "You should have killed me quick. You never had the stomach to kill anything quick. That's your whole trouble. You wanted the mountain to do it, and the mountain sent me back." "Eliza," Caleb's voice, low, a warning. "He's still got the gun. Don't get close." But Nathan wasn't looking at Caleb. Nathan's eyes had gone from Eliza to the growing knot of townsfolk at the mouth of the yard, a dozen of them now, drawn by the screaming, staring at the freight king. They all loved standing over 2 beaten men with a pistol in his fist and his dead wife alive in front of him. And Eliza watched the calculation run behind his eyes, watched him understand exactly how bad this looked, and watched the calculation turn cold. "This woman is mad," Nathan announced to the crowd, and just like that, the pleasant voice came back, smooth as ever, and it chilled Eliza to the bone how fast he could put it on. "Grief mad. My poor wife's cousin, come from back east, out of her mind with fever herself, thinks she's my late Eliza, God rest her. And this drifter's been feeding her delusion, filling her head, trying to work some swindle out of my grief." He shook his head, sorrowful, a good man beset. "Look at her. Half froze, filthy, raving. You all knew my Eliza. Does this wretch look like my Eliza to you?" And the terrible thing, the thing that stopped Eliza's heart, was that she saw it work. She saw doubt move through the crowd. Because they had wanted a funeral 3 weeks back, and they'd gotten one, they'd brought pies and wept, and a whole valley does not easily unbelieve a grave, and Nathan Crow was rich and beloved and standing there so reasonable and sad, and Eliza was a wild-eyed stranger in a torn coat swinging a stick of firewood. "You see?" Nathan said gently, to her now, and it was the cruelest thing he could have done, the gentleness. "You see how it is, Eliza. Nobody knows you. There's no you left to know. I made sure of that. You're a ghost, and folks don't listen to ghosts. Now put down the wood, and let me help you, and we'll get you somewhere you can rest." He held out his free hand, the very picture of mercy, and only Eliza and Caleb could see the pistol still cocked in the other. "Come home." For one horrible second, Eliza felt herself waver. 3 years of that voice. 3 years of being told what she was and wasn't, what was real and what she'd imagined, until she couldn't always tell anymore. The old fog came rolling back in, the fog he'd kept her in. "Come home. You're mad. Nobody knows you. You're nothing without me." And then Caleb Whitaker spoke. He didn't speak to Nathan. He turned and spoke to the crowd, and his voice carried flat and clear across the yard, the voice of a man who had once stood in courtrooms. "Her name is Eliza Carter," Caleb said. "She was Eliza Carter before she was fool enough to marry this man, and she's Eliza Carter still. I pulled her out of a barn 9 days ago, chained to a post with iron froze to her wrist. Left there to die in the storm by the same man standing in front of you now looking so sorrowful." He pointed. "You want to know if she's mad? Ask her something only Eliza Carter would know. Any of you. Ask her about her own life in this valley. Ghosts don't remember. Cousins from back east don't know. Ask her." The crowd shifted, and an old woman near the front, small and bent, in a black bonnet, pushed forward a half step and squinted, and her voice came out cracked and uncertain. "Eliza," the old woman said. "If you're Eliza, the winter the Purdy boy fell through the ice on the mill pond. Who went in after him?" The whole yard held its breath, and Eliza Carter, without a heartbeat's hesitation, said, "I did, Mrs. Ackerley. I went in after Tommy Purdy, and I lost my second-best boots doing it, and your husband, God rest him, gave me a new pair off his own shelf and wouldn't take a nickel, and I brought you a jar of my choke cherry jam to say thanks, and you told me it was too tart, and you were right. It was. I never could get the sugar right." Her voice broke. "It's me, Mrs. Ackerley. It's Eliza. I'm not dead. I've been under that man's feet the whole time you were grieving me." The old woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Sweet Lord," she whispered. "Sweet Lord in heaven. It's her. It's Eliza. That's Eliza Carter. That's her voice. That's her very—" She turned on Nathan, and her cracked old voice rose into something fierce. "You told us she was in the ground. We wept at your side. I made you a pie." And the crowd turned. It turned the way. Weather turns all at once, the doubt curdling into something darker, a dozen faces swinging from Eliza to Nathan and back. And Eliza saw the exact moment Nathan Crow understood that the story had gotten away from him, that a grave could be unbelieved after all, that his money and his charm had finally hit a thing they couldn't buy, which was a whole town's memory of a girl who went into an icy pond after a drowning child. And a cornered man is the most dangerous man there is. "Nathan," Caleb said sharply, because he saw it too, saw the arm come up. "Nathan, don't. There's a dozen witnesses. It's done. You lose slower if you put the gun down." "If she's alive," Nathan said, and his voice had gone soft and strange and final, "then I'm hanged. And if she's dead—" His knuckle whitened on the trigger. "Then it's her word gone quiet again. And I'm just a grieving husband whose mad cousin drew a gun, and this drifter shot her, and—" Three things happened at once. Caleb moved, throwing himself sideways and forward, not fast enough, never fast enough across that distance. And Eliza saw him move, and knew he'd not make it, knew the barrel was already lined on her heart. The old woman, Mrs. Ackerley, screamed, and a fourth voice cut across the yard like a whip, young and hard and shaking with fury. "Nathan Crow, you drop that pistol or I drop you where you stand." Nathan froze. At the mouth of the yard, badge on his chest and his own gun leveled two-handed and steady, stood a young man barely past 25, jaw tight, eyes blazing, and Eliza's knees near gave out from under her, because she knew that badge. She'd pinned her whole plan on that badge. Deputy Prentice. "I've been standing here a full minute, Crow," Prentice said, and his voice shook not with fear, but with a rage he could barely hold. "Heard the whole thing. Heard her name the Purdy boy. Heard you say you'd shoot her to keep her quiet. Heard you say you buried her alive." His gun didn't waver. "I've been in this county 4 months trying to find one honest reason to arrest you, and you just handed me a dozen in front of the whole town. Now you drop that iron, or I swear on everything holy I will give this valley a funeral it don't have to fake." For a long, long moment, Nathan Crow stood with his pistol on his wife, and a deputy's gun on his heart, and a whole town watching. And Eliza watched him do the arithmetic one last time, and she watched him lose it. The pistol lowered. His hand opened. It dropped into the dirt. And Nathan Crow, freight king, church patron, beloved of the whole valley, sat down slowly in the mud behind his own office as the strongbox slid off his lap and burst open, and out of it spilled a ledger, a second ledger, the true one, its pages fluttering in the wind for all the world to see. Caleb reached Eliza and caught her as her legs finally gave, and she sagged against him, shaking all over, staring at the man in the mud. "You did it," Caleb said into her hair, low, fierce, wondering. "Eliza, you did it. You walked down that mountain and you took it back. You did it. We did it, she gasped. You walked in front of me the whole way, just like you promised. I told you I would. Prentice was moving in now, cuffs out, calling 2 of the townsmen to help him, and he crouched by the spilled strongbox and picked up the true ledger and thumbed it open, and his young face went from anger to something like awe as he read. This is... He looked up. This is everything. Double books. Oversold routes. There's... His voice caught. There's a page here on a freight run through Raton Pass. Winter of '76. 5 men lost. Marked, settled, no liability. The yard went silent, and Caleb Whitaker went very still with Eliza in his arms. Say that date again, he said quietly. Winter of '76. Raton Pass. 5 men. Prentice was still reading. There's names. Drovers. Says here. He squinted. Says here one of 'em, the outfit guard. Family made trouble after. Filed a complaint. Marked. He stopped. Marked what? Caleb said, and his voice had gone to gravel. Prentice looked up, and understanding dawned on his face as he looked at the mountain man he'd only just met. Marked complaint handled. Brother discredited. Badge pulled. No further threat. Prentice swallowed. Whitaker. It says the brother's name was Whitaker, and Nathan Crow, sitting in the mud with his hands being drawn behind him, lifted his head and looked at Caleb for the first time, really looked, and something moved behind his ruined eyes, some old cold memory clicking into place. Whitaker, Nathan said slowly. The deputy. The one who wouldn't let the pass thing go. That was you. A terrible smile touched his mouth. That was you. All these years. And you're the one who... He started to laugh, low and broken and awful. The one woman I bury, and the one man I ruined, and they find each other on a mountain in a storm. What are the odds? What in God's name are the odds? There ain't no odds, Caleb said, and his arm tightened around Eliza, and his voice was thick with 8 years of grief finally reaching the man who'd earned it. It ain't odds and it ain't chance. It's a bill, Nathan. It's a bill come due. You spent your whole life certain the ground would just keep what you buried in it. My brother. This woman. The truth. He looked down at Eliza, and then back at the man in the mud. But the ground don't keep. Not forever. Sooner or later the thaw comes, and everything you buried comes up out of the snow with your name carved on it, and you get to stand there and watch it come. Prentice hauled Nathan to his feet. Nathan Crow, the young deputy said, and his voice rang clear across the yard for the whole valley to hear. You're under arrest for fraud, for false imprisonment, for the attempted murder of Eliza Carter, and, if this ledger reads the way I think it does, for a great deal more besides. And I'll tell you plain, there ain't enough money in this territory to buy your way clear of what this whole town just watched with its own eyes. They led him out of the yard. The crowd parted for him, and not one hand reached out in sympathy, and the old women who'd wept at his side and brought him pies turned their faces away, and Nathan Crow walked out of his own freight yard in irons past the neighbors who'd loved him, and Eliza Carter watched every step of it from inside the arms of the man who'd promised to walk in front of her, and she did not smile. She'd thought she would. For 3 years she'd dreamed of smiling at this, but there was no smile in her when it finally came. Only a great and terrible quiet, the quiet of a thing set down that she'd carried too long, and she turned her face into Caleb's coat, and she wept, and this time she knew exactly why, and she let herself. He's gone, Caleb murmured. He's gone, Eliza. He can't reach you now, not ever again. I know. You believe it? All the way down? She pulled back and looked at the empty mouth of the yard where they'd taken him, and then up at the mountain man's weathered face, and then, slowly, at the small crowd of neighbors still standing there, Mrs. Ackerley, with tears on her old cheeks, all of them looking at Eliza now. Not like a ghost, not like a stranger, but like a woman come home from the dead. I'm starting to, Eliza said. All the way down. I'm starting to. And Mrs. Ackerley crossed the yard on her cane, and reached up with one shaking hand, and touched Eliza's face like you'd touched something you'd grieved and never thought to hold again. Welcome back, child, the old woman whispered. We buried you all wrong. We'll set it right. We'll set all of it right. Eliza covered the old hand with her own ruined one, the one that had worn the iron, and she found that after everything, after the barn and the cellar and the storm and the grave, with her name still carved deep in the churchyard, she still had tears left to give, and they were not bitter ones. They gave her a room at the boarding house that first night, Mrs. Ackerley and 2 other women fussing over her, and Eliza lay in a clean bed with a door and could not sleep for the life of her. And near midnight, she got up and dressed and walked out into the cold and went looking for Caleb, because the truth was, she couldn't sleep unless she knew where he was. She found him on the porch of the freight office, of all places, sitting on the steps in the dark, looking at nothing. "You didn't take a room," she said. "Couldn't sit still in one." He didn't turn. "Sit if you want, or don't. Your choice." She sat. For a while neither of them said anything, and the town slept around them, the whole valley that had buried her and dug her back up all in one day. "You read the rest of it," she said finally. "The ledger. Prentice let you." He did. "Sam." Caleb was quiet a long moment. "There's a whole page on Sam," he said. "My brother's dying, worked out to the penny. What Crow saved by sending him out heavy and late. What it cost him to bury the complaint. What he paid the judge." His voice was flat and terrible. "There's a number, Eliza. There's a dollar number next to my brother's name. That's what Sam was worth to that man. A line in a book. Settled. No liability." He drew a breath. 8 years I wondered what happened up in that pass. And it turns out it wasn't a mystery at all. It was arithmetic. Sam died of arithmetic. Eliza didn't reach for him. She'd learned, from him, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was not reach. "I'm sorry," she said. "That knowing didn't fix it. I hoped it would fix something for you." "It fixed one thing," Caleb said. "For 8 years I thought I'd failed him. Thought if I'd been faster, smarter, if I'd built the case tighter, I could have got justice, and I just wasn't good enough." He turned and looked at her in the dark. "But it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It's that the whole game was bought. There was no version where I won it back then, not with the judge in his pocket. It took a woman he buried and a whole town watching to break it, because that was the only thing his money couldn't reach." He shook his head slowly. "I wasn't a bad lawman, Eliza. I was an honest one in a crooked county. There's a difference. Took me 8 years and you to see it. So it does help. A little. It helps that I get to stop hating myself for it," Caleb said quietly. "That's more than a little. That might be everything." They sat with that. "I couldn't sleep either," Eliza admitted. "Clean bed, warm room, a door with a latch. Everything I said I wanted. And I lay there and couldn't shut my eyes." "Why not?" "Because it's too quiet," she said, and her voice caught on it. 3 weeks in that cellar, the only sound was folks walking over my head. 9 days on your mountain, there was the wind and the fire, and you breathing across the room. And now there's this clean, quiet room, and nothing in it. And I lay there, and my heart's going like a rabbit's, and I don't know why. And then I figured it out." She looked at him. "There's no you in it. I got so used to knowing where you were. 9 days, and I can't sleep without knowing where you are. That's not right, is it? That's not healthy, needing to know where a person is to sleep." Caleb was quiet a moment. 9 days ago, you couldn't sleep because a man had chained you in the dark, he said. Tonight you can't sleep because you can't find the fella who unchained you. Those ain't the same thing, Eliza, and I won't let you turn 'em into the same thing in your head. One's a cage, the other's just... He stopped and started again, careful. The other's just a person you trust, in a world that ain't given you many to trust. There's no shame in it. There's no cage in it. When you can sleep in a room without knowing where I am, that'll be a fine thing, and I'll be glad for you. But wanting to know ain't the sickness. It's the opposite. It's you learning what safe feels like, and reaching for it. That's healing, not weakness. Don't you dare call it weakness. Eliza looked at him for a long time. How do you always know? She said. How do you always know the thing to say that takes the shame out of it? I don't always. I just know that shame's the thing they use to keep you. Every man like Crow, that's his tool, making you ashamed of the exact things that'd get you free. Ashamed of your anger. Ashamed of your fear. ashamed of wanting out. He looked at her. So when I hear you starting to be ashamed of something, I figure it's probably the thing that's trying to save you. And I say so. The days that came after were not simple, and Eliza had thought they would be. She had thought that once Nathan was in a cell, the fear would lift off her like fog burning off in morning sun. But the fear didn't know he was in a cell. The fear had lived in her body for 3 years, and it didn't take orders from the facts. A door slamming down the street sent her flat against a wall with her heart in her throat. A man's raised voice in the mercantile, some ordinary fella hollering at his mule, and she was back in the cellar, back in the barn, and she'd come to herself a minute later with her nails dug into her own palms and folks looking at her strange. I hate it, she told Caleb one evening. He'd taken work helping rebuild a fence line for a rancher named Cobb outside town, and she'd walked out to meet him, and they sat on the tailgate of Cobb's wagon in the last light. I hate that he's locked up and he can still do this to me. He's in a cell, Caleb, and he still reaches out and grabs me by the throat 6 times a day. It's not fair. Shouldn't it stop now that he can't touch me? Shouldn't it just stop? No, Caleb said. It don't just stop. I wish I could tell you it did. How long? When does it stop? Caleb picked up a splinter of fence rail and turned it in his fingers. You know I told you I've been shot twice, he said. First time was a fella named Hobbs, put a ball through my shoulder up close, so close I felt the powder burn. He rubbed the shoulder without seeming to notice he did it. That was 11 years ago. Shoulder healed up fine inside a season. But for 2 years after, every time a fella reached toward his coat, my whole body was back in that alley with Hobbs, sure as if it was happening fresh. 2 years, Eliza. And it wasn't a thing I could reason my way out of. My head knew Hobbs was dead. My body didn't care. 2 years, Eliza said faintly. Less, for some of it. And it don't go all at once. It goes like the snow goes. You don't wake up one day, and it's spring. You wake up, and there's a little less of it than yesterday. And then a warm spell, and it comes back. And then it's gone from the low places, but still up in the shadows. And one day you notice you walked clear across a field without it grabbing you, and you can't rightly remember when that started being true. He looked at her. It goes. But it goes slow, and it goes crooked, and there's no shame in how long it takes. You spent 3 years in that man's hands. You don't undo 3 years in 3 weeks. Whoever told you that you should is a liar, and if it's you telling you that, then you're being a liar to yourself, and I'll thank you to quit it. Eliza laughed, watery. You'll thank me to quit it. I surely will. Anybody ever tell you you've got a strange bedside manner? Caleb Whitaker. Ezra did, right before I took his toes. Caleb's mouth twitched. He lived to complain about it. I count that a success. And that, more than any gentle word, was the thing that started to bring her back to herself. Not being handled soft. Being talked to plain, like a person who could bear the truth, because God knew she'd borne worse. The trial came in the spring. A territorial judge rode in from Denver, one Nathan had never bought and couldn't, and the whole county packed into the meeting hall for it, and Eliza had to stand up in front of every soul who'd wept at her fake funeral and tell them what had really happened under their feet. She was sick with dread the morning of it. Caleb found her behind the boarding house being sick in the weeds. I can't, she said, wiping her mouth, furious at herself. I can't stand up there and have him look at me. I know it's the whole case. I know it's what hangs him. I built this. It was my idea. And I can't. The second he looks at me, I'll go back to being the woman in the cellar, and I'll forget every word. Caleb crouched down in front of her. Then don't look at him, he said. Look at me. I'll be in the front row. Whole time. You stand up there and you tell that judge what happened, and you keep your eyes on me, and you pretend it's just the two of us on the mountain, and you're telling me a story by the fire. Can you do that? What if I can't? Then you can't, and we find another way, and that man still hangs on the ledger alone if he has to. Caleb held her eyes. You hear me? You are not the whole case. I told you that on the mountain, and it's still true. If you get up there and can't say a word, we don't lose. Prentice has the books. Cobb saw the yard. Mrs. Ackerley'll swear to your voice. You do not have to carry this alone. You never had to carry anything alone again. That's the whole point of me being here. He took a breath. But if you can do it, if you can find it in you to stand up and put your own voice on the record, then it's yours. Then it's you that ends him, out loud, in front of everybody, and no man ever gets to tell you you're a ghost again. That's worth something. But only you can weigh if it's worth what it costs you. Your choice, same as always. Eliza knelt there in the weeds a long moment. "Front row," she said. "Front row. Won't move an inch." She stood up. She smoothed her skirt with her ruined hand. And she walked into that hall, and she took the stand, and she found Caleb Whitaker's weathered face in the front row. And she kept her eyes on him, and she told the whole valley the truth. She told them about the marriage that turned into a cage. She told them about the 3 tries at leaving, and what each one cost her. She told them about the day he stopped shouting and started smiling, and how she'd learned that was the day to be truly afraid. She told them about 3 weeks in a cellar hearing them all walk over her head, buying nails, laughing, grieving a woman who wasn't dead. She told them about the barn, and the chain, and the storm, and begging it to take her fast. And she never once looked at Nathan Crow, and it drove him half mad. She could feel it, could feel him willing her to look, to break, to remember what she'd been in his hands, and she never gave it to him. She looked at Caleb, and she told her story to Caleb, and it came out clear and whole and unbroken. And when she was done, there wasn't a dry eye in the hall, nor a soul left in that valley who believed Nathan Crow was anything but what he was. He was found guilty on every count. The Rayton Pass deaths, 5 of them, Sam among them, folded in on top of it all when Prentice put the true ledger into evidence. And the Denver judge read that page aloud in a voice like a closing door. Settled, no liability, brother discredited, and looked at Nathan Crow over his spectacles like he was looking at something scraped off a boot. They sentenced him to hang. Eliza thought she'd feel triumph. She'd been so sure, all those nights in the cellar, that the day they sentenced him, she'd feel like a queen. Instead, she walked out of the hall and kept walking, out past the edge of town, until her legs gave out, and she sat down in the new spring grass and shook. Caleb found her there. He didn't say anything. He sat down a few feet off, giving her room, and waited. "I don't feel good," she said finally. "I thought I'd feel good. He's going to hang Caleb, for what he did to me and to Sam and to those men, and I don't feel good. I feel hollowed out. I feel like somebody scraped me empty with a spoon. What's wrong with me?" "Nothing's wrong with you." "Then why?" "Because you spent 3 years and 3 weeks and a whole trial with that man is the biggest thing in your life," Caleb said. "Hating him was a full-time job. It filled you right up. And now the job's done, and there's a hole where it was, and your body don't know yet what to put there." He looked out over the valley. "I felt the same the day they took my badge, and I gave up on Sam's case. Emptied out. Because the fighting had become the whole shape of me, and when it stopped, I didn't know what shape I was anymore." He was quiet. "You're not hollow because something's wrong with you. You're hollow because you're free, and free is a room you've never lived in before, and it echoes till you get some furniture in it. That's all. That's all it is." Eliza wiped her face. "How do I get furniture in it?" she said. "This room, the free one. How?" "Slow," Caleb said. "One thing at a time. A garden, maybe. A door you lock from your own side, like you said. Work that's yours. People that know your real name." He picked at the grass. "Neighbors. Mrs. Ackerley's already claimed you. Near as I can tell, you'll not get shut of that old woman now. Cobb says you kept his fence line accounts better in a week than his last man did in a year. Offered you the job proper." He shrugged. "You fill it slow, with things you chose. That's what makes it yours instead of just empty. The choosing." "The choosing," Eliza repeated. "You come back to that a lot." "It's the only thing that matters," Caleb said simply. "It's the difference between a home and a cell. Same 4 walls sometimes. Same door. All the difference is who's got the say over the latch." She looked at him then, really looked, at the mountain man who'd stopped in a storm, who'd knelt in the snow and put his empty hands out, who'd narrated every touch so she'd never lose the say over her own body, who'd sat in the front row so she could find the words to hang the man who buried her, who was sitting 3 careful feet away right now so she'd never once feel crowded. And something in Eliza Carter that had been frozen for a very long time began, quietly, to thaw. Caleb, she said. When you pulled me out of that barn, you said if I told you to, you'd walk away and I'd never see your ugly face again. You remember that? I remember. I've been thinking about it, about how you kept your word this whole time. Every choice you handed me, even when it near killed you too. Even walking down that mountain, you wouldn't put your thumb on it. She swallowed. So I want to make a choice. A real one. My own. And I want you to hear it as mine, and not argue it. Caleb went still. All right. I don't want you to walk away. Her voice shook, but she held it. I know that's not the deal. I know you said no gratitude, nothing owed, and I believe you. That's the only reason I can say this at all. Because I know it's not the chain talking. It's not fear. It's not needing a protector. I've had a protector. That's not this. She made herself look at him. This is me, choosing. With my own free say, in my own free room. I don't want you to go back up that mountain alone. I want you down here, with me. Whatever that turns out to look like. That's my choice, Caleb Whitaker. Now you can have yours. For a long moment, the mountain man couldn't speak. Eliza, he said, and his voice had gone rough as broken ground. You understand what I am. 8 years a hermit, bad-tempered, can't sleep. See my brother in every snowbank. I ain't an easy thing to live near. I didn't ask for easy. I had easy once before I knew better. Easy was a handsome man with a nice voice and a nice house. Her mouth twisted. I'll take hard and honest over easy and false every day I've got left. You're the most honest thing that ever happened to me. That's not nothing. That's the whole entire thing. Caleb looked at her, and then he looked out at the valley for a long time, and when he turned back, his eyes were wet. And Eliza had never once seen that, not through all of it. I stopped that night, he said. On the trail. I told you I almost walked on. I've thought a lot about why I didn't. Told you it was Sam, and it was. But it was more than that. He drew a breath. For 8 years I told myself I'd quit people because people were cruel, and I was done with them. And that was a lie I told myself to keep from admitting the real thing, which was that I'd quit people because I was afraid. Afraid to fail somebody again the way I failed Sam. Easier to be alone than to try and lose. And I called it wisdom, but it was just fear wearing a wiser man's coat. He looked at her. And then I heard you screaming, and every bit of that fear said keep walking. And I looked at 8 years of keeping walking, and I thought, if I walk on now, that's the rest of my life. That's who I am till I die. A man who hears somebody drowning and keeps walking to stay dry. He shook his head. I couldn't be that. Not one more time. So I turned around. Not just to save you, Eliza. To save the last piece of me that was worth a damn. And did it, Eliza whispered. Save it. You saved it, Caleb said. You reached up out of that barn, and you grabbed the last good piece of me, and you wouldn't let it go, and you've been dragging it back to life ever since, contrary as you are. A rough laugh. So no, I ain't walking away. I wasn't ever going to, if I'm honest. I just wasn't going to say so till you did, because it had to be your say. It always had to be your say. But since you've said it. He reached out, slow, the way he did everything, giving her all the time in the world to pull back. And he laid his weathered hand palm up in the grass between them. An offer, not a grab, never a grab. Since you've said it, Eliza Carter, then here's my say, plain as I've got. I'd be honored to come down off that mountain. And I'd be honored to help you build that room with the door you lock from the inside. And I give you my word, on Sam, on everything, that latch'll be yours and yours alone, always. And I'll knock every time till the day I die. Eliza looked at that open hand in the grass a long moment. And then she put her ruined one into it, the one that had worn the iron, the one he'd saved, and his fingers closed around it gentle as they had that first night. And for the first time since she was 16 years old and could outrun every boy in the county, Eliza Carter was holding a man's hand because she had chosen to, all the way down, with nothing in it but her own free will. Knock loud, she said, and her voice broke on a laugh. I don't hear so good since the cellar. I'll knock loud, Caleb said. I'll knock loud enough to wake the whole valley. And they sat there in the new grass with their hands clasped between them and the town at their backs, and the mountain rising up green and gentle, now in front of them, where it had once been white and cruel. And neither of them said anything more for a long while, and neither of them needed to. They hanged Nathan Crow on a gray morning in April. Eliza did not go. Caleb offered to take her, said some folks needed to see it to believe it was really over, and he'd stand with her if she wanted, and she thought about it a long time, and chose not to. She spent that morning instead on her knees in the dirt behind the little house she'd taken at the edge of town, planting a garden, and Caleb knelt beside her, and they put seeds in the ground, while a mile away, the man who'd buried her alive answered at last for all of it, and Eliza never once looked up. "You all right?" Caleb asked her, when the distant bell finally tolled, and they both knew what it meant. Eliza sat back on her heels and looked at the little rows of turned earth, the seeds of things that would be green by summer, things she'd chosen and planted with her own hands in her own ground. "I'm burying him my way," she said quietly. "Not with a rope, with this, with a garden and a door and a life he swore I'd never have." She pressed another seed into the soil. "He wanted the last thing I ever did to be scream his name in a barn, and instead the thing I'm doing while he hangs is planting beans." A small, fierce smile touched her mouth. "Let that be the record. Not the barn, the beans." Caleb looked at her, at this woman he'd pulled half dead out of the snow, who was kneeling in the sun planting beans on the morning her tormentor hanged, and he thought his heart might not be able to hold what it was holding. "The beans," he agreed, rough. "Let it be the beans." And the bell tolled its last, far off, and neither of them marked it, because they were both looking at the dark turned earth and the small green promise buried in it. And that was where their eyes stayed. Spring came up green over the valley, and the garden Eliza had planted on the morning of the hanging came up with it, and by June there were beans on the vine and squash spreading fat leaves across the dark earth, and she would stand in the mornings with a cup of coffee and look at that garden and feel a thing she had no good word for, a thing that was close to peace but had more teeth in it, more pride. The fierce, quiet pride of a woman looking at something she'd made with her own hands that no man could take from her. But peace, she was learning, did not arrive all at once and stay. It came the way Caleb had said the fear would go, crooked and slow, in fits and warm spells, and sudden cold snaps that knocked her flat when she least expected them. The first cold snap came in early summer, and it came wearing the face of a stranger. A man rode into town one afternoon, a heavy-set fellow in a good coat, asking questions at the mercantile, and word reached Eliza before she ever laid eyes on him, the way word always reached her now, the whole valley having appointed itself her keeper after what they'd learned they'd let happen under their own feet. "Man's asking after the Crow estate," Mrs. Ackerley told her, breathless, having hurried the 4 blocks on her cane to bring the news. "Asking who's got claim to the freight business now. Crow's hanged. Asking after you by name, Eliza. Wanted to know where the widow lives." The word widow went through Eliza like a blade. "I'm not his widow," she said, and her voice came out harder than she meant. "I was never his widow. He put me in the ground 3 weeks before he ever needed the word. I know it, child, I know. But the law don't always know what we know." And that was the thing that turned Eliza cold, standing in her own doorway, with her own garden green behind her. The law. She had used the law to hang Nathan Crow, had built her whole salvation on a ledger and a judge and a young deputy's badge, and it had never once occurred to her that the same law might turn in her hand and cut her. She found Caleb at Cobb's place, mending harness, and she told him, and she watched his face go still and careful, in the way that meant he was thinking 3 steps ahead, and didn't like where any of them led. "A widow inherits," Caleb said slowly, "and a widow owes. If Crow's estate is drowning in debt, and a man that crooked always owed as much as he stole, then whoever they name his widow inherits the debts along with the freight line." He set down the harness. "That fella in the good coat, he ain't here to hand you a fortune, Eliza. He's here to hand you a bill." "I don't want any of it," Eliza said. "The business, the money, the house, none of it. I'd sooner burn it. I want my garden and my door and my accounts work for Cobb, and I want to never hear the name Crow again as long as I live. I know you don't want it, but wanting shed of a thing and being shed of it ain't the same, not in law." Caleb's jaw worked. That's the trouble with the law. It saved you, and now it's going to try and stick you with his grave to tend. Same law. It don't care which. The heavy-set man's name was Ambrose Fisk, and he was a lawyer out of Denver, and he came to Eliza's door 2 days later with a leather case full of papers, and a manner so smooth and sorrowful it turned her stomach, because she'd known a smooth, sorrowful man before, and she'd learned exactly what lived under that particular oil. Caleb stood inside the door when Fisk came, off to the side, quiet, and Eliza noticed the lawyer clock him and dismiss him, a rough mountain fellow of no account, and she thought, "You go on and underestimate him, mister. Everybody does, right up until they don't." "Mrs. Crow," Fisk began. "Carter," Eliza said. "Eliza Carter. There's no Mrs. Crow. There never was, not the way you mean it." "Of course, Miss Carter." Fisk smiled and did not stop calling her Mrs. Crow in every paper he laid out, she noticed. The small, relentless untruth of it. The way a man like this worked, wearing you down, a word at a time. "I represent the creditors of the late Nathan Crow's estate, and I'm afraid, Miss Carter, that as his surviving spouse, the debts of that estate fall to you. Considerable debts. I have here." "I wasn't his spouse when he died," Eliza said. "I was a woman he'd declared dead and buried 3 weeks prior. There's a headstone. You can go read it. He killed off Eliza Crow himself, in the eyes of God and the county both, and put up a stone to prove it. You can't hang a man for burying his wife alive, and then turn around and call that same wife his widow when the bill comes due. Pick one. He can't have murdered me and been married to me at the same moment." Fisk's smile flickered, just slightly, and Eliza saw that she'd landed a blow he hadn't expected, and some old 16-year-old part of her that could outrun every boy in the county sat up and grinned. "That's a novel argument," Fisk said. "But the marriage was never legally dissolved. A false death certificate doesn't—" "Was there a death certificate?" Caleb said, from the side of the room. Fisk turned, mildly annoyed at the interruption. "I beg your pardon? Was there a death certificate? A real one? Filed proper with the territory?" Caleb pushed off the wall, unhurried. "Because if Crow told the whole valley his wife died of fever, and there was a funeral, and a stone, then somewhere there's a paper says Eliza Crow is legally deceased, filed by Nathan Crow's own hand. And if there is, then Nathan Crow's estate is on record swearing this woman was dead before he was ever hanged. His estate can't now swear she's alive and married to him to collect a debt. Not without calling its own filed paper a lie. And a man's estate can't be heard to profit from his own fraud." Caleb's voice stayed easy, but it had picked up something, an old cadence, a courtroom rhythm. "You'd know that better than me, Mr. Fisk, being a lawyer. Estoppel, I believe they call it. A man can't take one position to murder a woman and the opposite position to bill her. And neither can the men who bought up his debts hoping to squeeze his widow, because they stand in his shoes, and his shoes are full of his own lies." The room went quiet. Fisk looked at the rough mountain man he'd dismissed, and Eliza watched the recalculation move across his fat, smooth face, watched him understand he'd walked into something he hadn't scouted. "You've some legal training," Fisk said, carefully now. "Deputy Marshal, near 10 years, Caleb said. "New Mexico and Colorado both. Sat through more trials than you've had hot suppers, most likely, and watched more crooked lawyers try more crooked squeezes than I care to count. I know the shape of a bluff when it rides into town in a good coat." He nodded at the leather case. "You came here betting a frightened widow would sign whatever you put in front of her to make you go away. But she ain't a frightened widow. She's a woman who put her own husband on the gallows with her own testimony. You want to take her to a court over this, Mr. Fisk? You go right ahead. Only I'd think hard on what a Denver judge is going to say when your whole claim rests on calling Nathan Crow's death certificate a fraud, which is to say, on proving in open court that your client's whole estate was built on burying people who got in its way." Caleb smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. "That's a lot of digging, mister, and you never know what comes up out of the ground once you start." Ambrose Fisk sat very still for a moment. Then he began, without another word, to gather his papers back into his leather case. "I'll want to review the filings," he said stiffly. "It may be that the estate's claim against Miss Carter is less certain than my clients were led to believe." I expect it may be, Caleb agreed. Good day, Miss Carter. Fisk stood, and to his small credit he said Carter that time, and he put on his hat, and he left, and they heard his horse go out of the yard at a good clip, a man in a hurry to be gone. Eliza stood in the middle of her own front room, shaking, not with fear this time, but with the shock of it, the sheer unfamiliar shock of having been threatened and having won. He's not coming back, she said. Is he? Tell me he's not coming back. He might send a letter or two to save face for his clients, but no, men like Fisk don't fight when the ground won't hold 'em. He came to squeeze something soft, and he found rock. Caleb was watching her. You did that, you know, not me. I just knew the lawyer word for it. You're the one told him to his face he couldn't murder you and marry you both. That's the whole argument, Eliza. That's the thing that wins it. I just dressed it up in Latin. I couldn't have said it without you standing there. I'd have signed his papers a year ago just to make him leave. A year ago, maybe. Not now. Caleb crossed to her. Look at your own hands. They're shaking, but they didn't reach for the pen. A year ago, they'd have reached for the pen. That's the difference, Eliza. That's a year of you in this valley, in that garden, behind that door. You didn't reach for the pen. Eliza looked down at her hands. The ruined wrist was near healed now, just a pale ring where the iron had ridden, a scar she'd stopped hiding under long sleeves somewhere back in the spring. And they were shaking, both hands. But he was right. They hadn't reached for the pen. No, she said wonderingly. I didn't. And that was the day, more than the hanging, more than the trial, that Eliza Carter understood she was going to be all right. Not healed, not finished. But all right, in the way that a person becomes all right, which is not by having no more trouble come, but by finding, when it does come, that she has become the kind of woman who does not reach for the pen. The freight business, when the legal dust settled that autumn, turned out to be worth less than nothing, drowned in Crow's secret debts just as Caleb had guessed, and the creditors carved it up among themselves and left Eliza entirely out of it, glad enough to be rid of any claim on the woman whose testimony had hanged the man they'd lent to. She signed exactly one paper in the whole business, a release, disclaiming any interest in Nathan Crow's estate, and she signed it Eliza Carter in a firm, clear hand, and felt, as the ink dried, the last thread connecting her to that man finally part and fall away. There, she said, setting down the pen. Now I've reached for a pen. But it was to sign him out of my life, not into it. That one I'll allow myself. But if the world had done with Nathan Crow, Eliza found the valley was not done with her, and here came the second cold snap. And it came from a direction she never saw. It came from the town itself. For all that they'd claimed her, welcomed her back from the dead, wept over how they'd failed her, there were those among them who could not quite forgive Eliza for what her survival made them feel. Because a whole valley had grieved the woman who wasn't dead, had brought pies to her murderer, had walked over her cellar buying nails and laughing, and some folks, faced with a shame that large, would sooner be angry at the woman who made them feel it than at themselves for feeling it. It started small. A cold shoulder at the mercantile. A conversation that stopped when she entered the church. A woman named Prudence Gill, who'd been thick as thieves with Nathan and had never quite been called to account for it, taking to remarking, just loud enough, that it was awful convenient how the mountain drifter turned up right when there was a freight fortune to be had, wasn't it? And how folks who'd been through what Eliza claimed to have been through didn't generally take up so quick and easy with a strange man, did they? And what did that say? Eliza heard it. She was meant to hear it. And it did what nothing Fisk had said could do. It got under her skin and into the old wound, and it festered there. Because it took the two things she had, her survival and her Caleb, and it made them dirty. She didn't tell Caleb at first. She was ashamed to, which she'd have known was a warning sign if she'd been thinking clear. But shame doesn't let you think clear. That's its whole purpose. She let it eat at her for the better part of 2 weeks. Let Prudence Gill's poison do its slow work. Until one evening Caleb came to her door for supper, as he did most evenings, and she opened it and just stood there. And he took one look at her face and knew. Who? He said. Who's got that look on you? I know that look. I put a year of my own life into learning that look. Somebody's been telling you you're dirty. Who? And it came out of her all at once. Prudence Gill, and the church going quiet, and the whispers about the freight fortune and the drifter, and what kind of woman takes up so quick with a strange man, and how she'd started. God help her. She'd started half believing it, started looking sideways at her own heart, wondering if it was true, if she'd only reached for Caleb because she was broken and needed a keeper, if the whole thing between them was just the cellar in a prettier shape. Caleb listened to all of it without a word. And when she was done, he was quiet a moment, and then he said something she didn't expect. "You want me to go?" "What?" "If you've got a real doubt, not Prudence Gill's doubt, your own. If some part of you looks at us and wonders whether it's free, or whether it's the seller wearing a nice coat." His voice was steady, but she could see what it cost him to say it. "Then I'll go back up the mountain tonight, and you can have all the time in the world to work it out clean, with me nowhere near to muddy it. I mean that. I'd hate it, but I mean it, because the one thing I will not do, the one thing, is be a man you're with because you feel you can't get free of him. I'd rather lose you honest than keep you that way." He met her eyes. "So I'm asking you plain. Do you want me to go?" And Eliza stood there in her doorway and felt the whole weight of the choice land on her, and understood, slowly, that this was Prudence Gill's poison undone in a single stroke, because a keeper does not offer to leave. A cage does not open its own door and say, "Walk out if you doubt me." Only a free thing does that. Only a man who meant every word he'd said on that mountain about the latch being hers. "No," she said. And then, stronger. "No. God, no. Sit down and eat your supper, Caleb Whitaker, and don't you ever ask me that again." "I'll ask it any time you get that look. That's the deal. Any time you doubt it's free, I'll open the door and prove it is." That's the most backwards courting I ever heard of. A man threatening to leave to prove he'll stay. "I'm a backwards man," Caleb said. "You knew that going in." And Eliza laughed, and the laugh cracked Prudence Gill's poison right down the middle and let the light in, and she reached out and pulled him inside by the front of his coat and shut her own door behind him, latched it from her own side, and that was the end of that particular cold snap. But she was not content to let Prudence Gill go on poisoning the well, because Eliza Carter had learned in the cellar that silence was the thing that let evil grow, and she would be silent no more, not for anyone, ever again. So the next Sunday she did a thing that set the whole valley talking for a decade after. She went to church, and she sat in the front pew, which was the Gill family pew, which nobody had sat in but Gills for 30 years. And when Prudence Gill came in and found her there, Eliza patted the seat beside her, friendly as anything, and said, in a voice that carried clear to the back of the church, "Come sit, Prudence. I've been meaning to talk to you. I hear you've been wondering out loud about my character, and I figured, why should you have to whisper it? Let's you and me air it out proper, in the Lord's house, where lying's a sin. You go ahead and ask me right here, in front of everybody, whatever it is you've been asking behind my back, and I'll answer you true. And then everybody can judge for themselves whose character wants examining." The church went dead silent. Prudence Gill turned the color of a beet. She had built her little campaign in whispers and corners, the way that kind of cruelty always builds, and dragged into the open daylight. It curled up and died, because she had nothing to say, no real charge, only the cowardly sideways poison of a woman who'd befriended a murderer and couldn't bear the living proof of it. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Prudence managed. "No," Eliza agreed pleasantly. "I don't reckon you do. That's rather my point." And she stood, and she smoothed her skirt, and she walked back to her own pew with her head high, and she left Prudence Gill standing there in the wreck of her own whispers with the whole valley watching, and not one soul in that church whispered about Eliza Carter's character again, because they'd all just seen exactly whose character was the sound one. Caleb was waiting outside after, and he'd heard it through the open windows like everyone else, and he was shaking his head with something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close kin to it. "You know," he said, "when I pulled you out of that barn, I thought I was saving a woman needed saving." "You were. I was. But I want to be real clear about something, Eliza, that I've been coming to understand slow and understood all the way through just now, listening to you take Prudence Gill apart in the house of God." He stopped and looked at her. "I did not save you. I got you off a post and out of a storm, and I'd do it 100 times over, but that's the smallest part of what happened this year, and I'll not have anybody, including you, tell it wrong. I unlocked a cage. That's all I did. Everything since, the case, the trial, Fisk, Prudence Gill, the garden, the door, the whole life you've built, every bit of that is you. You saved yourself, Eliza. I just happened to be walking by with a file the night the cage needed opening. You did all the rest with your own 2 hands, one of them half froze. Eliza looked at him a long moment in the churchyard sun. You really believe that, she said. That you were just a fella walking by with a file? I know it. Then you're wrong about the smallest part, she said. You want to tell it right, tell it right. Anybody with a file could have got the iron off my wrist. A dozen men could have. But you're the only one who came down the mountain in the first place. That's the part that wasn't small, Caleb. Everybody else in this whole valley heard about me and did nothing, grieved me and brought pies and did nothing. You're the one who turned around. The file was small. The turning around was the whole entire thing. She reached up and touched his weathered face, in the churchyard, in front of God and Prudence Gill and everybody, a thing she'd never have dared a year ago. So don't you undersell it. You didn't save me, but you're the one who came. And there's a world of difference, and I'll not have you tell that part wrong either. The seasons turned. Autumn browned the valley and winter came again, and Eliza found that she'd feared the winter, feared the snow that had near killed her, feared the first storm that would come howling down off the mountain and take her back to the barn in her mind. And it did come, a big one, in December, near a year to the day from the night Caleb heard her crying. She woke in the dark to the sound of the wind screaming against the walls, and for a moment she was there again, chained to the post. The iron froze to her wrist, begging the storm to take her fast, and her heart went to hammering, and her breath went to sobbing, and the old terror had her whole. But this time when she came up out of it, gasping, she was not in a barn. She was in a bed, in a house, behind a door she had latched herself from her own side. And there was a fire in the hearth, and there was a man asleep in the next room who had never once in a year come through that door without knocking. And there was a whole valley of neighbors down the hill who knew her real name and would come running if she screamed it. She lay there and listened to the storm, and slowly, slowly, she understood that the storm could not touch her. It could scream all it liked. It could throw itself against the walls until spring. She was inside, and warm, and free, and the door was latched from her side, and the same wind that had once been her executioner was now just weather, just noise, just the winter doing what winter does to a woman it could no longer reach. You're the cold, she whispered to the storm, the way she had a year ago in the barn. I know your tricks, but you don't own me anymore. You never did. You just borrowed me for a night, and a mountain man came and took me back. And she did a thing then she would not have believed possible a year before. She rolled over, in the warmth, with the blizzard raging against the walls of her own safe house, and she went back to sleep. In a storm. The first winter storm of her whole life that she slept clean through, unafraid, because she had finally, all the way down to the bottom of herself, learned the difference between a storm that can kill you and a storm you're watching from inside your own locked door. In the morning, the world was white and enormous and beautiful, and the storm had blown itself out, and Eliza stood in her doorway with her coffee and looked at all that snow that had once meant her death, and felt nothing but the clean, cold pleasure of a winter morning. Caleb found her there. You slept, he said, surprised. Through the whole blow. I checked on you twice. You never stirred. A year ago, a storm like that would have had you up screaming till dawn. I know. She smiled into her coffee. I told the storm off, Caleb, middle of the night. Told it didn't own me anymore. And then I went back to sleep, and I dreamed about the garden. Caleb was quiet a moment, and when he spoke his voice was thick. That's it then, he said. That's the spring I told you about. The snow going out of the shadows. You just walked clear across the field, and it didn't grab you. I did, didn't I? She looked at him. You said one day I'd notice I'd gone a while without it grabbing me, and I wouldn't remember when that started being true. I think it started last night. I think last night was the day. They were married in the spring, a year and some after the storm, in the little church where Eliza had taken Prudence Gill apart, and Mrs. Ackerley cried the whole way through it, and Deputy Prentice, who was Sheriff Prentice now, stood up for Caleb, and half the valley came, the half that had learned its lesson, and the other half stayed home, and nobody missed them. Eliza wore her scar bare at her own wedding, the pale ring around her wrist where the iron had ridden, and when the preacher bound her hands to Caleb's, she made sure that wrist was on top, where everyone could see it, and afterward folks asked her why she hadn't covered it for the occasion, and she looked at them like they were simple. "Cover it?" she said. "This is the most honest thing I own. This is the proof I lived. I'd sooner cover my own eyes." They did not build their life on dramatic promises. Caleb had never been a man for those, and Eliza had heard enough dramatic promises from Nathan Crow to last her 3 lifetimes. They built it instead the way Caleb had said you fill an empty room, slow, one chosen thing at a time. A garden that got bigger every year. Caleb's carpentry, which turned out to be the thing he'd been for all along. A builder, a mender, a man who made sound and solid things where before there'd been nothing or ruin. Eliza's accounts work, which grew until half the valley brought her their books, because word got around that Eliza Carter could find a hidden dollar the way a hound finds a hidden bone. And folks trusted her the way you trust someone who has personally seen what a crooked ledger can do to a life. And then came the thing that Eliza had never once let herself hope for. The thing she'd been sure the cellar and the barn had frozen out of her forever. She opened a house. Not a home, though it was that too. A house, on the mountain road, at the edge of town. A low solid place Caleb built with his own hands over the course of a summer, and Eliza put a sign on it, and the sign said, "No fancy thing, just a plain board with plain letters," but everyone in 3 counties came to know what it meant. It was a house for women who had nowhere to go, women running from husbands like Nathan Crow. Women the law hadn't helped, and the church had shamed, and the neighbors had whispered about. Women with rings worn into their wrists, some of them, or bruises they'd stopped explaining, or that particular silence Eliza knew from the inside, the silence of a person who has learned that speaking costs more than they can pay. They came up the mountain road, sometimes in the dead of night, sometimes half froze, sometimes near dead, the way Eliza had been near dead, and they knocked on the door, and Eliza Carter opened it, and she always opened it herself. She never once let anyone else answer that particular knock, no matter the hour, no matter the weather, because she remembered what it was to knock on a door in a storm and not know if the thing that opened it would save her or finish her, and she was bound and determined that every woman who knocked on her door would see, first thing, before anything else, the face of another woman who had been exactly where she was and had lived. "You're safe," she'd tell them, everyone, the same words, standing in her own doorway with the light behind her. "You're safe now. Come in out of the cold. And the door here latches from the inside, and you're the one who holds the latch. Nobody comes through it you don't say. I promise you that, and I keep my promises, because a mountain man once made me that same promise, and he never broke it, not once, and I'll be damned before I break it to you." Caleb took to the work as though he'd been made for it, which perhaps he had. He'd spent 8 years learning to be alone, and 1 year learning to be with Eliza. And it turned out the whole while he'd been quietly becoming a man who could sit in a room with a woman who'd been terrorized and make her feel, by his stillness and his announced motions and his empty offered hands, that she'd finally reached a place where no more harm was coming. He fixed their wagons and mended their shoes and taught the ones who wanted to learn how to shoot straight and split wood and survive a winter, and he never once, in all the years of it, made a single one of them feel watched. And the valley, which had once buried Eliza Carter and grieved her wrong, came slowly to understand what it had among it. The whispers died. Prudence Gill moved away to a sister's in Kansas and was not much mourned, and the name Eliza Carter, which Nathan Crow had tried to erase from the earth and carve on a headstone and bury under a lie, came instead to mean, in that valley and the ones around it, a particular thing. It came to mean the door that opens. It came to mean the woman who came back. It came to mean, to every desperate soul who ever climbed that mountain road in the dark, that survival was possible, That a person could be thrown away and buried and grieved, and still, claw her way back into the light, and build something so solid and so good that it caught other falling people and held them up. The headstone still stood in the churchyard. The one with her name carved deep, Eliza Crow, the marker Nathan had raised over his lie. The county offered more than once to take it down, and Eliza always said no, leave it, and folks thought that strange until she explained it. And once she explained it, nobody thought it strange again. Leave it standing, she said. I want it there. I want folks to walk past it and see my name on a grave and then look up the mountain road and see the smoke from my house, both at once. Because that's the whole story right there, in one look. He carved me a grave, and I went and got myself a life anyway, close enough that you can see 'em both from the same spot. Let it stand. Let it be the biggest lie in that whole churchyard. I outlived it. Let everybody see that a stone can lie, and a woman can walk right past her own grave into the sun. Years went by, and they were good years, and they were not without their sorrows, because no life is, but they were hers. Every one of them chosen. Every one of them lived behind a door she held the latch to, and one evening, when they were both getting on, when the garden had grown into something more like a small farm, and the house on the mountain road had taken in more women than either of them could rightly count anymore, and sent most of them back out into the world. Stronger than they'd come, Eliza and Caleb sat on their own porch in the last of a summer light, and watched the mountain go gold and then gray. The same mountain that had once been white and cruel and meant her death. You ever think about that night? Eliza said. The barn. You ever think how close it came? How you almost walked on? Every day of my life, Caleb said. Every single day. I think about how the wind cut out just when it did, right when your voice could reach me. Half a minute either way, and I'd have never heard you. I'd have walked on up the mountain and you'd have... He couldn't finish it, even now, even after all the years. It was that close. Our whole life was that close to never being. It wasn't chance, though, Eliza said. You told Nathan that, in the yard, remember? You said it wasn't odds and it wasn't chance. It was a bill come due. I didn't understand it then. I thought you meant just for him. She reached over and took his old hand in her old hand, the one with the pale ring worn into it that she'd never once covered. But it was for us too, wasn't it? Not chance. A bill the world owed two people it had thrown away, finally getting paid. You'd lost Sam, and I'd lost myself, and the world owed us both something, and it paid the whole debt off in one storm, on one mountain, half a minute either way. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe it was just a man who'd learned the hard way not to walk past somebody drowning, in the same place at the same time as a woman too stubborn to stop hollering. He squeezed her hand. I've stopped needing it to mean something bigger. It's enough that it happened. It's enough that I turned around. Eliza was quiet for a while, watching the mountain go dark. He tried to make my whole life about him, she said finally. That was the thing at the end. Nathan. He wanted to be the biggest thing that ever happened to me, even in death, even the memory of him. He wanted the last true thing about Eliza Carter to be that she was the woman he broke. She shook her head slowly. And he isn't. That's the victory, Caleb. Not the hanging. This. He isn't the biggest thing that ever happened to me. He isn't even close. He's a stone in a churchyard with a lie carved on it, and I'm a woman who walks past it into the sun, and everything that matters about my life happened after him, and none of it has his name on it. He wanted to be my whole story, and it turns out he was just the storm at the beginning, just the cold I got out of. The stars came out over the mountain, the same stars that had watched her nearly die, that watched over her house full of saved women now, and Eliza Carter leaned her gray head on the shoulder of the man who'd turned around, and felt no fear at all, in the dark, in the mountains, in the whole wide, dangerous world. Because here, at the end of it, was the truth she had bought with 3 years in a cage and 3 weeks in a cellar, and 1 night chained in a frozen barn. The truth she had spent her whole reborn life proving to every trembling woman who ever knocked on her door. That being saved is a fine thing, and being loved is a finer one, but neither is the miracle. The miracle came earlier, and quieter, and it belonged to her alone. The miracle was the moment in the barn when her body was failing and her voice was gone, and every reason on earth said to lie down and let the storm take her. And instead, some last unbroken coal in her refused, and she lifted her head, and she filled her ruined lungs, and she chose to scream one more time into the dark, on the wild, impossible chance that the world still held one soul who would turn around. She had saved herself that night. The mountain man only came because she called, and she had gone on saving herself every day after, in every choice, in every latched door and planted seed and hard truth spoken plain, until saving herself had become so much a part of her that it spilled over and started saving others. A whole mountain road full of others. Women who would go on to save themselves and spill over and save still more. On and on. Farther than she would ever live to see. The man who found her crying in the snow had not become her owner, nor her rescuer, nor her keeper. He had become her equal and her partner, and the great good love of a life she'd very nearly not gotten to live. But he had never once been the reason she survived. She was the reason she survived. And that, in the end, was the thing Nathan Crow never understood. The thing that hanged him and freed her and outlived them both. He thought he could throw a woman away. He thought a person was a thing you could bury and be done with. He never once reckoned on the terrible, unkillable truth that some souls, no matter how deep you dig the grave, will claw their way back up through the frozen ground and stand in the sun and build a door and hold the latch and never, ever be buried alive again. Eliza Carter was one of those souls. She always had been. The barn only proved it.